The story of the Clovis people begins not in the vast plains of North America where their distinctive spear points would later be discovered, but in the frozen steppes of northeastern Siberia during one of the most dramatic climatic periods in human history. Between approximately 26,500 and 19,000 years ago, the last glacial maximum transformed the planet into a world barely recognizable today. Ice sheets up to 2 miles thick covered much of northern Europe and North America, locking away so much water that global sea levels dropped by nearly 400 feet. This dramatic reduction exposed a massive landmass connecting Asia and North America, a bridge that would become the gateway for the first human inhabitants of the Americas. Beringia, as this exposed land is known today, stretched roughly 1,000 miles from north to south at its widest point, encompassing an area larger than Texas. Far from being a narrow crossing, this was a substantial continent in its own right, featuring rolling hills, river valleys, and expansive grasslands that supported diverse megafauna including mammoths, horses, bison, and caribou. The archaeological evidence suggests that small bands of hunter-gatherers had been living in this region for millennia, following herds across the landscape and adapting to the harsh but resource-rich environment. The genetic evidence linking modern Native American populations to their Asian ancestors provides compelling support for this migration theory. Mitochondrial DNA studies reveal that virtually all Native American populations share common maternal lineages that can be traced back to a relatively small founding population from northeastern Asia. These genetic markers, particularly haplogroups A, B, C, and D, are found throughout the Americas, but show their closest relationships to populations in Siberia, Mongolia, and the Lake Baikal region of Russia. The distribution of these genetic signatures suggests that the founding population was already genetically distinct before entering the Americas, having been isolated in Beringia for several thousand years. Y chromosome studies examining paternal lineages tell a similar story. The predominant Y chromosome haplogroup Q, found in high frequencies among Native American males, has its origins in Central Asia and shows a clear pattern of expansion from Beringia into the Americas. The genetic diversity within this haplogroup increases as one moves from north to south through the Americas, consistent with a single migration event followed by rapid population expansion and dispersal. Recent advances in ancient DNA technology have provided even more detailed insights into this migration. Genetic analysis of ancient remains from both Siberia and the Americas reveals that the ancestors of Native Americans experienced a significant population bottleneck in Beringia, reducing their effective population size to perhaps just a few hundred individuals. This bottleneck lasted for several millennia, during which time the population remained genetically isolated from their Asian relatives, while developing the unique genetic characteristics that would be carried throughout the Americas. The timing of human entry into the Americas south of the ice sheets remains a subject of intense archaeological debate. Traditional models based on Clovis chronology suggested that humans first entered the continental United States around 13,500 years ago, when retreating glaciers opened viable migration routes. However, this timeline has been challenged by mounting evidence from sites across both North and South America that appear to predate the earliest known Clovis occupations. Two primary routes have been proposed for human movement from Beringia into the heart of North America. The ice-free corridor hypothesis suggests that as the climate began warming around 15,000 years ago, the massive Cordilleran and Laurentide ice sheets that had blocked southward movement began to separate, creating a narrow corridor along the eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains. This corridor, running through present-day Alberta and extending into the Great Plains, would have provided a direct route for both humans and the animals they hunted to move south. Recent geological and paleo-environmental research has refined our understanding of when this corridor became viable for human habitation. While the ice sheets began separating earlier than previously thought, the corridor remained largely barren of vegetation and animal life until approximately 13,000 years ago. The landscape that emerged was initially a harsh environment of glacial lakes, exposed bedrock, and sparse vegetation that would have offered little sustenance for travelling hunter-gatherer groups. The coastal migration theory has gained significant support as an alternative or complementary explanation for early human movement into the Americas. This model proposes that maritime-adapted populations moved south along the Pacific coast, utilising watercraft to navigate between ice-free refugia and following rich marine resources. The Pacific coast during the late Pleistocene would have presented a dramatically different landscape than today, with the coastline extending far beyond the current shore due to lower sea levels. Archaeological evidence supporting coastal migration remains limited, primarily because most potential sites now lie beneath hundreds of feet of ocean water. However, the discovery of human remains and artefacts on the Channel Islands off California, dating to over 13,000 years ago, demonstrates that early Americans possessed sophisticated maritime technologies. The presence of these early coastal populations, combined with the rapid appearance of human occupations throughout South America by 14,000 years ago, suggests that coastal migration may have been faster and more efficient than overland routes. The pre-Clovis debate has intensified with discoveries at sites like Monteverde in Chile, which has provided compelling evidence for human occupation of South America by 14,600 years ago. The Monteverde site, excavated over decades by Tom Dillahay, revealed a well-preserved settlement with wooden structures, stone tools, and organic remains that clearly predate the earliest known Clovis sites by over 1,000 years. The implications of this chronology are profound. If humans reached southern Chile by 14,600 years ago, they must have entered North America considerably earlier, possibly by 16,000 years ago or more. Additional pre-Clovis sites have been reported across the Americas, though many remain controversial. The Meadowcroft rock shelter in Pennsylvania has yielded radiocarbon dates extending back to 19,000 years ago, though questions about contamination and stratigraphic integrity continue to fuel debate. Similar controversies surround sites like Cactus Hill in Virginia, Paisley Caves in Oregon, and the Buttermilk Creek Complex in Texas, all of which have produced evidence suggesting human presence before 13,500 years ago. The Buttermilk Creek Complex, located beneath the famous Clovis site of Galt in Texas, has provided some of the most compelling pre-Clovis evidence in North America. Excavations have revealed thousands of stone tools in stratigraphic contexts that clearly predate the overlying Clovis occupation. Radiocarbon dates from this pre-Clovis component range from 13,200 to 15,500 years ago, suggesting that sophisticated stone tool technologies were being employed in North America well before the appearance of Clovis points. The relationship between these early populations and the later Clovis culture remains unclear. Some researchers argue for technological and cultural continuity, suggesting that Clovis technology developed from earlier American traditions. Others propose that Clovis represents a separate migration or technological innovation that spread rapidly across a continent already sparsely populated by earlier groups. The genetic evidence from ancient DNA studies suggests that all Native American populations, including both pre-Clovis and Clovis groups, derive from the same founding population, indicating biological continuity, even if cultural traditions may have varied. The environmental context of these early migrations cannot be understated. The Americas that greeted the first human inhabitants bore little resemblance to the landscapes encountered by later European explorers. Vast ice sheets covered much of Canada and the northern United States, while the exposed continental shelves created land masses now submerged beneath the oceans. The climate was significantly colder and more arid, supporting different plant and animal communities than those found today. Perhaps most dramatically, the Americas were home to a spectacular array of megafauna that would become extinct by the end of the Pleistocene. Massive ground sloths the size of automobiles browsed in forests from Alaska to Argentina. Saber-toothed cats stalked herds of horses, camels, and giant bison across the plains. Enormous short-faced bears, standing over 10 feet tall on their hind legs, dominated the predator landscape. American cheetahs, dire wolves, and giant armadillos added to this menagerie of creatures that early Americans would have encountered regularly. The first Americans developed sophisticated hunting strategies to exploit these rich animal resources. Evidence from kill sites across the continent reveals that early hunter-gatherers successfully hunted everything from mammoth and mastodon to smaller game like caribou and elk. These hunting activities required detailed knowledge of animal behaviour, seasonal migration patterns, and landscape features that could be used to advantage during hunts. Stone tool technology among these early populations was already highly developed by the time they entered the Americas. The ancestors of the Clovis people brought with them knowledge of sophisticated lithic reduction techniques, including the ability to produce thin, sharp blades and bifacial tools. This technological foundation would prove crucial for survival in the diverse and challenging environments of the New World, setting the stage for the remarkable cultural adaptations that would follow. The technological sophistication that early Americans brought with them from Asia would reach its zenith in the distinctive tool-making traditions that emerged across North America between 13,500 and 12,800 years ago. Among these various regional adaptations, none would prove more influential or widespread than the remarkable stoneworking innovations developed by the people we now call the Clovis culture. Their mastery of lithic technology represents one of the most significant technological achievements in human prehistory, producing tools of such effectiveness and aesthetic refinement that they would dominate the archaeological record across an entire continent for nearly 7 centuries. The hallmark of Clovis technology lies in their distinctive projectile points, artifacts so precisely crafted and functionally superior that they revolutionized hunting strategies throughout North America. These points, typically measuring between 4 and 20 centimeters in length, exhibit a characteristic lanceolate shape with a concave base and parallel to slightly convex edges. What sets Clovis points apart from all other contemporary and earlier projectile technologies is the presence of a distinctive channel flute extending from the base toward the tip on one or both faces of the point. This fluting represents perhaps the most technically demanding aspect of Clovis point manufacture. The process required the napper to remove a single, long flake from the base of an already thinned biface, creating a shallow channel that could extend up to 2/3 the length of the finished point. Archaeological experiments have demonstrated that successful fluting requires extraordinary skill and carries significant risk of catastrophic failure that could destroy hours of careful work. The fact that Clovis nappers consistently achieve successful fluting across thousands of points found throughout North America speaks to a level of technological standardization and expertise that had no precedent in the archaeological record. The manufacturing sequence for Clovis points began with the careful selection of raw materials. Clovis toolmakers demonstrated remarkable knowledge of stone properties, consistently choosing high-quality cryptocrystalline materials that possessed the necessary characteristics for producing large, thin bifaces. Chert, a fine-grained sedimentary rock composed primarily of microcrystalline quartz, formed the backbone of Clovis lithic technology in much of eastern North America. The uniform crystal structure of high-grade chert allowed for predictable fracture patterns essential for the controlled removal of flakes during point manufacture. In the western regions, Clovis nappers exploited extensive obsidian sources, volcanic glass that provided the sharpest cutting edges achievable with stone technology. Obsidian's homogeneous structure and complete lack of crystal boundaries made it ideal for producing the extremely thin cross-sections characteristic of Clovis points. Chemical sourcing studies have revealed that Clovis groups transported obsidian across distances exceeding 300 kilometers, indicating extensive trade networks or highly mobile populations that maintain detailed knowledge of widely scattered raw material sources. Chalcedony, jasper and other varieties of cryptocrystalline silica also featured prominently in Clovis tool assemblages. The selection criteria consistently favoured materials with fine grain size, minimal inclusions, and predictable fracture properties. Clovis knappers often rejected locally available materials in favour of higher quality stones obtained from distant sources, demonstrating that functional considerations outweighed convenience in their technological choices. The lithic reduction strategy employed by Clovis toolmakers followed a sophisticated sequence that maximised the utility of carefully selected raw materials while minimising waste. The process typically began with the production of large flake blanks struck from prepared cores using hard hammer percussion. These initial blanks provided the foundation for biface manufacture, offering the napper a relatively flat surface with predetermined edge angles suitable for further shaping. The transformation of these blanks into finished Clovis points required mastery of pressure flaking techniques that allowed for precise control over flake removal. Using tools fashioned from antler, bone or dense wood, skilled knappers systematically removed small flakes from both faces of the biface, gradually reducing thickness while maintaining symmetrical form. This process, known as bifacial thinning, required careful attention to edge angle maintenance and heat treatment timing to prevent fractures that could ruin the developing tool. Heat treatment played a crucial role in Clovis lithic technology, though its application required intimate knowledge of specific stone types and their thermal properties. By heating chert and other silicious materials to temperatures between 350 and 400 degrees Celsius, knappers could alter the internal structure of the stone, making it more amenable to controlled flaking. This process, likely conducted in carefully controlled fires or heated sand beds, improved the stone's knapping qualities while maintaining its structural integrity. The fluting process that created the characteristic Clovis channel represented the culmination of the manufacturing sequence. Archaeological analysis suggests that fluting was accomplished through indirect percussion, using a punch-like tool placed at the base of the point and struck with a hammerstone. The precise placement of this tool, combined with careful control of force application, allowed skilled knappers to remove the channel flake without destroying the point. Success rates for experimental fluting attempts by modern knappers rarely exceed 50%, even after extensive practice, highlighting the exceptional skill level achieved by Clovis artisans. The functional advantages provided by fluting have been the subject of considerable archaeological debate. The channels clearly facilitated hafting by providing a secure seating area for the point within a split wooden shaft. The reduced thickness at the base also minimised the diameter of the haft, potentially improving the aerodynamic properties of the complete projectile. Some researchers have suggested that the channels served as blood grooves, allowing for more efficient bleeding of wounded animals, though experimental evidence for this function remains inconclusive. Beyond projectile points, Clovis tool assemblages included a standardised array of implements that reflected sophisticated understanding of different functional requirements. End scrapers, typically manufactured on thick flakes with steep working edges, provided efficient tools for hide processing and woodworking. These implements often show evidence of extensive use wear, indicating their central importance in daily subsistence activities. The working edges frequently exhibit the characteristic polish and micro-chipping patterns associated with hide scraping, suggesting that leather production formed a significant component of Clovis material culture. Side scrapers, featuring working edges along the lateral margins of flakes, served complementary functions in hide processing and possibly plant preparation. The edge angles on these tools typically range between 45 and 70 degrees, providing the optimal geometry for efficient scraping while maintaining edge durability. Many side scrapers show evidence of resharpening through systematic retouch, indicating that these tools were curated and maintained over extended periods of use. Gravers represented another crucial component of the Clovis toolkit, featuring sharp, pointed projections created through careful retouch of flake edges. These tools served specialized functions in working bone, antler, and wood, creating the grooves and perforations necessary for composite tool manufacture. The precision required for graver production and use reflects the sophisticated understanding of material properties and tool geometry that characterize Clovis technology. Cutting implements in Clovis assemblages included both formal tools and expedient flakes used without modification. Formal cutting tools often featured carefully prepared edges with specific geometric properties optimized for particular tasks. Expedient tools, created through simple flake removal from cores, provided sharp cutting edges for immediate use in butchering and other activities requiring minimal tool investment. The production of these various tool types followed reduction strategies that maximized the utility of available raw materials while maintaining technological standards. Clovis knappers demonstrated remarkable consistency in their approach to tool manufacture, producing assemblages with standardized forms and proportions across vast geographic distances. This standardization suggests the existence of shared technological traditions transmitted through social learning mechanisms that maintained cultural coherence across widely dispersed populations. Core reduction strategies in Clovis technology emphasize the production of large flakes suitable for tool manufacture while maintaining core utility for extended periods. Blade production, though less common than in some contemporary Old World traditions, occurred at several Clovis sites, indicating familiarity with systematic blade removal techniques. These blades often served as blanks for small tool production, or were used directly as cutting implements. The geographic distribution of Clovis technology extends from the Arctic Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico, and from the Atlantic to the Pacific, representing one of the most widespread archaeological phenomena in North American prehistory. This distribution pattern reflects either rapid population expansion by groups sharing common technological traditions, or the swift adoption of Clovis innovations by existing populations across the continent. The consistency of technological attributes across this vast area suggests strong cultural mechanisms for maintaining technological standards despite the challenges of communication across enormous distances. Regional variations in Clovis technology provide insights into adaptation to local environmental conditions and raw material availability. Points from the Great Plains tend to be larger and more robust than those from forested regions, possibly reflecting differences in hunting strategies and prey species. Western Clovis points often exhibit superior craftsmanship and more exotic raw materials, suggesting access to high-quality lithic sources and possibly greater investment in tool production. The relationship between Clovis technology and megafauna hunting has been a central focus of archaeological research. The size and robusticity of Clovis points clearly indicate their design for hunting large animals, and their frequent association with mammoth, mastodon, and bison remains at kill sites provides direct evidence for this function. The effectiveness of Clovis weaponry in megafauna hunting likely contributed to the rapid spread of these technologies across environments where large game provided primary subsistence resources. Experimental archaeology has provided valuable insights into the performance characteristics of Clovis projectile systems. Tests using replica points hafted to wooden shafts and propelled by atlatls demonstrate penetration capabilities sufficient to inflict lethal wounds on large mammals. The thin cross-sections and sharp edges of Clovis points minimize tissue displacement during penetration, while maximizing cutting efficiency, creating wounds that promote rapid blood loss in large prey animals. The hafting systems used with Clovis points required sophisticated knowledge of organic material properties and composite tool construction. Evidence from well-preserved sites suggests that points were typically secured within split wooden shafts using organic adhesives and sinew bindings. The fluted bases provided secure seating within these hafts, while the reduced thickness minimized stress concentrations that could lead to shaft failure during impact. The sophisticated lithic technology that defined Clovis culture found its ultimate expression in the pursuit of North America's massive Pleistocene megafauna. These ancient hunters developed specialized strategies for confronting creatures that dwarfed any animals found on the continent today, employing coordinated group tactics, intimate knowledge of animal behavior, and precisely engineered weaponry to bring down mammoths weighing up to 6 tons. The archaeological record preserves dramatic snapshots of these encounters at kill sites scattered across the continent, where the bones of ancient giants lie intermingled with the distinctive fluted points that ended their lives. The Pleistocene ecosystem that Clovis hunters inhabited supported an extraordinary diversity of large mammals that had evolved during millions of years of climatic fluctuation. Columbian mammoths, standing nearly 14 feet at the shoulder with tusks exceeding 12 feet in length, represented the largest land mammals in North America. These massive proboscideans roamed in herds across the grasslands and parklands, their seasonal migrations creating predictable opportunities for human hunters who learned to anticipate their movements. Woolly mammoths, smaller but equally formidable, occupied the northern regions where their thick coats provided protection against harsh climatic conditions. American mastodons, distinguished from mammoths by their different dental structure and browsing habits, inhabited forested regions throughout eastern North America. These creatures, reaching heights of 10 feet and weights approaching 5 tons, possessed straighter tusks than their mammoth relatives and fed primarily on woody vegetation. Their preference for forested environments created different hunting challenges for Clovis groups, requiring modified strategies adapted to dense vegetation and limited visibility. Giant bison, significantly larger than their modern descendants, formed massive herds that thundered across the Great Plains. Bison antiquus individuals could weigh nearly twice as much as contemporary bison, with horn spans reaching 6 feet across. These animals provided not only substantial quantities of meat, but also hides, bones, and other materials essential for tool manufacture and shelter construction. The predictable seasonal movements of bison herds offered Clovis hunters opportunities for communal hunts that could provide resources for extended periods. Ground sloths of various species added another dimension to the Pleistocene megafauna community. Megalonyx, the Jefferson ground sloth, reached the size of a large bear and possessed powerful claws capable of stripping bark from trees and defending against predators. Glossotherium, another ground sloth species, approached the size of a small automobile and inhabited regions from the Great Plains to the southeastern United States. These slow-moving herbivores represented relatively accessible prey for skilled hunters, though their formidable claws and massive size demanded careful approach strategies. The hunting strategies employed by Clovis groups against these massive animals required unprecedented levels of coordination, planning, and technological sophistication. Archaeological evidence from kill sites reveals that successful megafauna hunting involved multiple individuals working in carefully orchestrated teams, each member fulfilling specific roles in complex hunting sequences. The logistics of approaching, killing, and processing animals weighing several tons demanded social organization and cooperative behavior that represented significant advances over earlier hunting traditions. Blackwater Draw in New Mexico provides one of the most thoroughly investigated examples of Clovis megafauna hunting practices. This site, discovered in the 1930s, preserves evidence of mammoth kills that occurred approximately 13,000 years ago along the margins of a Pleistocene pond. Excavations revealed the articulated remains of several Columbian mammoths in direct association with Clovis points and other stone tools, providing unambiguous evidence for human hunting of these massive creatures. The spatial distribution of artifacts and bones at Blackwater Draw suggests that hunters approached the mammoths while the animals were drinking at the pond edge, taking advantage of the predictable behaviour patterns that brought these massive creatures to water sources. Multiple Clovis points found embedded in or immediately adjacent to mammoth bones indicate that successful kills required the coordinated efforts of several hunters simultaneously launching projectiles at vital target areas. The placement of these points suggests intimate knowledge of mammoth anatomy, with hunters targeting areas where major blood vessels and organs could be reached through the thick hide and massive musculature. Stone tools recovered from the Blackwater Draw mammoth kills include not only the projectile points used in the actual hunting, but also the full range of implements necessary for processing such enormous carcasses. Large cutting tools, choppers and scrapers indicate that butchering operations required specialised equipment capable of penetrating thick hides and processing massive quantities of meat, fat and other organic materials. The systematic distribution of these tools around the mammoth remains suggests organised work areas where different aspects of carcass processing occurred simultaneously. Murray Springs in Arizona presents another compelling example of Clovis megafauna hunting, preserving evidence of both mammoth and bison kills in stratigraphic contexts that allow detailed reconstruction of hunting events. The site contains remains of at least 2 mammoths and several bison in association with over 30 Clovis points and numerous other stone tools. Radiocarbon dates place these kills at approximately 12,900 years ago, near the end of the Clovis time period. The Murray Springs evidence suggests that Clovis hunters employed different strategies depending on the species being hunted and the specific environmental context. The mammoth kills appear to represent ambush hunting at water sources, similar to the pattern observed at Blackwater Draw. However, the bison remains show evidence of drive hunting, where animals were herded into favourable locations for mass killing. This strategic flexibility demonstrates the sophisticated understanding of animal behaviour and environmental manipulation that characterise successful Clovis hunting groups. Bone modifications at Murray Springs provide detailed insights into Clovis butchering practices and the systematic exploitation of megafauna carcasses. Cut marks on mammoth bones indicate that hunters possessed detailed knowledge of skeletal anatomy, efficiently removing meat and other useful materials while minimizing energy expenditure. The presence of impact fractures on long bones suggests systematic marrow extraction, while the distribution of bone fragments indicates organized disposal of processing waste. The Lena site in Arizona adds further dimensions to our understanding of Clovis megafauna hunting through its preservation of multiple mammoth kills in a relatively confined area. Excavations revealed the remains of at least 9 young mammoths associated with 13 Clovis points and numerous other artifacts. The concentration of juvenile animals suggests selective hunting strategies that targeted younger, more manageable individuals while avoiding the extreme dangers associated with confronting fully mature adults. Taphonomic analysis at the Lena site indicates that the mammoth kills occurred during a relatively brief period, possibly representing a single hunting episode or closely spaced events. The preservation of articulated skeletal elements suggests rapid burial following the kills, providing exceptional insights into the immediate aftermath of Clovis hunting activities. Tool distributions around individual carcasses reveal organized work areas where specific processing activities occurred, indicating systematic approaches to resource extraction and utilization. The projectile technology employed in these megafauna hunts represented the culmination of Clovis lithic innovation. The large, robust points found at kill sites typically measure between 7 and 15 centimetres in length, with substantial thickness and carefully controlled edge angles optimized for penetrating thick hides and dense muscle tissue. Experimental studies demonstrate that these weapons, when properly hafted and delivered with sufficient force, possessed penetration capabilities adequate for inflicting lethal wounds on the largest Pleistocene mammals. Atlatl technology played a crucial role in Clovis megafauna hunting, providing the mechanical advantage necessary to propel heavy projectiles with sufficient velocity to penetrate mammoth and mastodon hides. These spear-throwing devices, consisting of wooden shafts with hooks or cups that engaged the butt end of darts, could increase projectile velocity by 50% or more compared to hand-thrown spears. The leverage provided by atlatls allowed hunters to maintain safe distances from dangerous prey while delivering potentially lethal strikes. The coordination required for successful megafauna hunting demanded sophisticated communication systems and social organisation. Archaeological evidence suggests that Clovis hunting groups consisted of multiple family units that came together for major hunting episodes, pooling their knowledge and labour for complex operations that individual families could not accomplish alone. These aggregations required leadership structures, decision-making processes, and resource-sharing agreements that went far beyond the organisational requirements of smaller-scale hunting activities. Seasonal mobility patterns among Clovis groups were closely tied to the movement patterns and behavioural cycles of their megafauna prey. Mammoth herds followed predictable migration routes between summer and winter ranges, creating opportunities for hunters who could anticipate these movements and position themselves at strategic locations. Water sources, mountain passes, and river crossings became focal points for hunting activities, as these landscape features channeled animal movements into predictable corridors. The timing of hunting activities required detailed knowledge of animal reproductive cycles, seasonal behaviour changes, and environmental conditions that affected prey vulnerability. Late summer and early fall represented optimal hunting seasons for many megafauna species, when animals had accumulated fat reserves for winter survival, but had not yet dispersed into smaller, less accessible groups. Pregnant females and juveniles provided preferred targets during certain seasons, while mature males might be avoided except under specific circumstances. Processing megafauna carcasses presented logistical challenges that required specialised knowledge and equipment. A single adult mammoth could provide over 2 tons of meat, along with massive quantities of fat, hide, bone, and other useful materials. The sheer scale of these resources exceeded the immediate consumption capabilities of small hunting groups, necessitating preservation techniques and storage strategies that allowed for long-term utilisation of hunting success. Meat preservation likely involved a combination of drying, smoking, and fat-rendering techniques that transformed perishable protein into storable forms suitable for winter consumption or transport during seasonal movements. Archaeological evidence for these activities remains limited due to poor preservation of organic materials, but ethnographic parallels from Arctic and subarctic hunter-gatherers provide models for understanding how Clovis groups might have managed such abundant resources. The ecological relationships between Clovis hunters and Pleistocene megafauna extended beyond simple predator-prey interactions. These early Americans occupied a complex ecosystem where multiple large predators competed for similar resources, creating competitive pressures that influenced hunting strategies and settlement patterns. Short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and American lions all pose potential threats to human hunting groups while simultaneously competing for access to megafauna prey. Scavenging opportunities provided alternative pathways for accessing megafauna resources without the risks associated with active hunting. Clovis groups likely monitored the activities of large predators, taking advantage of kills made by other species when circumstances allowed. The distinctive cut marks found on some megafauna bones suggest that humans sometimes gained access to carcasses after initial consumption by other predators, requiring different processing strategies adapted to partially consumed remains. The relationship between Clovis hunting practices and megafauna extinction remains one of the most contentious issues in North American archaeology. The rapid disappearance of most large mammal species at the end of the Pleistocene coincides closely with the appearance and spread of Clovis technology, leading to ongoing debates about the role of human hunting in these extinctions. While climatic changes clearly played significant roles in ecosystem disruption, the efficiency of Clovis hunting technology and the apparent naivety of megafauna populations toward human predation suggest that hunting pressure may have contributed to population declines. The archaeological record indicates that Clovis hunting focused primarily on proboscideans and large ungulates, with less evidence for systematic exploitation of other megafauna species. This selective hunting pattern suggests that Clovis groups targeted species that provided optimal returns for hunting effort, while avoiding animals that presented excessive risks or limited rewards. The apparent preference for mammoth and mastodon hunting may reflect both the substantial resources these animals provided and their behavioural characteristics that made them accessible to human hunters. Regional variations in Clovis megafauna hunting reflect adaptations to local environmental conditions and prey availability. Great Plains sites show evidence for intensive bison hunting, while southeastern sites contain more diverse assemblages including mastodon, horse, and various smaller mammals. Western sites often preserve evidence for mammoth hunting in association with distinctive landscape features that facilitated successful hunting strategies. The technological innovations required for megafauna hunting extended beyond projectile points to include specialized tools for carcass processing, hide preparation, and resource transport. Large cutting implements, bone-breaking tools, and hide processing equipment represent technological adaptations specifically designed for dealing with massive animal resources. The standardization of these tool types across Clovis sites suggests shared technological traditions adapted to the unique challenges of megafauna exploitation. The mastery of megafauna hunting that characterized Clovis culture was inextricably linked to highly sophisticated patterns of mobility and social organization that enabled these early Americans to exploit resources across vast continental distances. Archaeological evidence reveals that Clovis groups maintained extraordinarily mobile lifestyles, moving seasonally across territories that often exceeded 500 kilometers in diameter, while maintaining complex social networks that facilitated information sharing and technological standardization across the entire continent. This remarkable organizational system allowed relatively small populations to successfully colonize and exploit the diverse environments of North America within the span of just a few centuries. The distribution of Clovis sites across North America presents a pattern that clearly reflects the mobility strategies employed by these early hunter-gatherers. Rather than concentrated settlements indicating sedentary occupation, Clovis archaeological sites appear as widely scattered localities that represent temporary camps, kill sites, tool manufacturing areas, and cached resource locations. This dispersed pattern extends from the Yukon Territory in northwestern Canada to the Gulf Coast of Texas and Florida, encompassing virtually every major ecological zone on the continent. The consistent presence of Clovis technology across such diverse environments demonstrates the remarkable adaptability of these mobile populations to varying resource bases and climatic conditions. Site density patterns reveal that Clovis occupations were most frequent in areas that provided optimal combinations of high-quality lithic resources, reliable water sources, and predictable game concentrations. The Great Plains show particularly dense concentrations of Clovis sites, reflecting both the abundance of megafauna in these grassland environments and the presence of extensive high-grade chert deposits that provided essential raw materials for tool manufacture. River valleys throughout the continent served as corridors for Clovis movement, offering reliable water sources, diverse plant and animal resources, and natural pathways through otherwise challenging terrain. The temporary nature of most Clovis occupations is evident in the archaeological signatures these sites preserve. Typical Clovis camps contain relatively thin cultural deposits with limited evidence for substantial structures or long-term habitation features. Instead, these sites preserve evidence for brief but intensive activities including tool manufacture, hide processing, meat preparation, and equipment maintenance. The artifact assemblages from these locations suggest that Clovis groups carried most of their essential equipment with them, establishing temporary camps where specific tasks could be accomplished before moving on to the next location in their seasonal rounds. Blackwater Draw serves as an excellent example of the multi-component nature of Clovis land use patterns. Beyond the famous Mammoth Kill areas, the site contains evidence for multiple episodes of occupation spanning several decades or possibly centuries. These occupations include tool manufacturing areas where large quantities of lithic debris indicate intensive stone tool production, processing areas where megafauna carcasses were systematically butchered, and maintenance areas where existing tools were resharpened and repaired. The spatial separation of these different activity areas suggests that Clovis groups organised their camps according to functional requirements while maintaining flexibility for rapid relocation when circumstances demanded. The Galt site in Texas provides exceptional insights into Clovis settlement organisation through its preservation of extensive occupation areas with clearly defined activity zones. Excavations have revealed discrete areas specialised for different aspects of daily life, including lithic reduction workshops, hide processing stations, hearth complexes for cooking and warmth, and tool maintenance areas. The systematic organisation of these activity areas indicates that Clovis groups possessed sophisticated understanding of camp layout principles that maximised efficiency while minimising interference between different tasks. Lithic workshops at Galt demonstrate the intensive tool production activities that characterised many Clovis camps. These areas contain thousands of flakes, cores, and tool fragments representing all stages of the reduction sequence from initial core preparation through finished tool manufacture. The presence of heat treatment facilities, evidenced by fire-cracked rock concentrations and thermally altered lithic materials, indicates that Clovis knappers employed sophisticated techniques to improve raw material quality. The scale of lithic production at workshops like Galt suggests that some camps served as staging areas where groups prepared extensive tool inventories before embarking on extended hunting expeditions or seasonal movements. Tool caches represent another crucial component of Clovis settlement systems, providing evidence for the sophisticated logistical planning that enabled these mobile populations to maintain technological efficiency across vast territories. These caches typically contain collections of finished tools, raw materials, or partially completed implements buried at strategic locations for future retrieval. The geographic distribution of known caches suggests that Clovis groups established supply networks that allowed them to access essential resources without carrying excessive loads during their movements. The East Wenatchee cache in Washington state exemplifies the sophisticated planning evident in Clovis logistical systems. This remarkable assemblage contains over 40 stone tools, including beautifully crafted Clovis points, knives, and other implements manufactured from high-quality materials obtained from sources hundreds of kilometers away. The tools were carefully wrapped in organic materials and buried in a location that would have been easily relocated by the individuals who placed them there. Radiocarbon dates indicate that this cache was deposited approximately 13,000 years ago, placing it near the end of the Clovis period. The Fenn cache, discovered in northwestern Wyoming, provides additional evidence for Clovis caching behaviour through its collection of exceptionally large and well-crafted bifaces. Many of these implements exceed the normal size range of functional tools, suggesting that they may have served ceremonial or display functions in addition to their practical utility. The investment of labour required to produce such elaborate pieces indicates that Clovis groups allocated significant time and skill to creating objects that transcended purely utilitarian purposes. Seasonal mobility patterns among Clovis populations can be reconstructed through analysis of site locations, resource availability, and environmental conditions that would have influenced movement decisions. The geographic distribution of sites suggests that many Clovis groups followed annual cycles that took advantage of predictable resource concentrations at different times of the year. Spring aggregations at favoured hunting locations allowed for communal megafauna hunts and social interactions between normally dispersed family groups. Summer dispersal into smaller territories enabled exploitation of diverse plant resources and smaller game animals that required less coordinated hunting efforts. Fall hunting activities focused on accumulating resources for winter survival, with emphasis on large game hunting and intensive processing activities that produce storable food supplies. Winter camps were typically established in sheltered locations that provided protection from harsh weather, while offering access to cached resources and reliable water sources. The cyclical nature of these movements created predictable patterns that allowed different groups to coordinate their activities and maintain social connections, despite the vast distances involved. Territorial ranges for individual Clovis groups appear to have been enormous by the standards of most hunter-gatherer societies. Lithic sourcing studies reveal that Clovis toolmakers regularly obtained raw materials from sources located 200 to 300 kilometers from the sites where the finished tools were ultimately discarded. Some exceptional cases document transport distances exceeding 500 kilometers, indicating either direct procurement through long-distance travel or exchange networks that moved materials across multiple group territories. The Thunderbird site in Virginia illustrates the extensive territorial ranges evident in Clovis settlement patterns. Lithic materials at this site derive from sources scattered across a region encompassing parts of 5 modern states, with some materials originating from locations over 400 kilometers away. The diversity of raw material sources represented at single sites suggests that Clovis groups either maintained enormous annual territories or participated in exchange networks that provided access to distant resources through trade relationships. Social organisation among Clovis populations must have been sufficiently sophisticated to coordinate the complex logistical requirements of their mobile lifestyle while maintaining technological and cultural coherence across continental distances. Group size estimates based on site areas, hearth distributions, and resource consumption patterns suggest that typical Clovis bands consisted of 20 to 40 individuals representing several related families. These small groups would have been large enough to accomplish the coordinated hunting activities necessary for megafauna exploitation, while remaining small enough to move efficiently across the landscape without overwhelming local resource bases. The egalitarian nature of Clovis social organisation is suggested by the relatively uniform distribution of high-quality tools and exotic materials across different sites and regions. Unlike later archaeological cultures that show clear evidence for social stratification and differential access to resources, Clovis assemblages display remarkable consistency in tool quality and raw material access, regardless of site location or apparent function. This pattern suggests that Clovis society operated according to principles of resource sharing and reciprocal exchange that prevented the accumulation of wealth or status differentiation based on material possessions. Information sharing networks among Clovis populations must have been extraordinarily effective to account for the rapid spread and remarkable consistency of their technology across the entire continent. The standardization of tool forms, manufacturing techniques, and technological innovations across distances exceeding 3,000 kilometers indicates communication systems that could transmit complex technical information between widely separated groups. These networks likely operated through a combination of direct contact during seasonal aggregations and multi-step information transfer, through intermediate groups that maintained connections across vast territories. The speed with which Clovis technology spread across North America suggests that information transmission occurred much more rapidly than population movement alone could account for. Mathematical models of cultural diffusion indicate that the observed pattern of Clovis expansion required active mechanisms for sharing technological innovations between existing populations, rather than simple replacement of earlier groups by expanding Clovis populations. This rapid cultural transmission implies sophisticated social mechanisms for evaluating, adopting and standardizing new technologies across diverse environmental and cultural contexts. Gender roles and division of labour within Clovis society must be inferred primarily from archaeological evidence and ethnographic analogies with historically documented hunter-gatherer groups. The emphasis on large game hunting evident in the archaeological record suggests that adult males played prominent roles in the pursuit and killing of megafauna, activities that required significant physical strength, coordination, and specialized knowledge. However, the successful processing and utilization of massive carcasses would have required the participation of entire social groups, including women and children who contributed essential skills in hide preparation, meat processing, and resource preservation. Tool assemblages from Clovis sites include implements associated with both male and female activities in ethnographically documented societies. Projectile points and hunting equipment represent technologies typically associated with male activities, while scrapers, cutting tools, and processing implements reflect the full range of subsistence activities that required participation from all group members. The high quality and sophisticated manufacture of tools associated with hide processing and plant preparation indicates that these activities were valued equally with hunting in terms of technological investment and skill development. The organisation of activities within Clovis camps suggests that labour was divided according to specialised knowledge and skill requirements, rather than rigid gender-based restrictions. Archaeological evidence for discrete activity areas indicates that different tasks were spatially separated, allowing individuals with appropriate expertise to work efficiently without interference from incompatible activities. This organisational flexibility would have been essential for groups that needed to accomplish complex processing tasks rapidly before moving to new locations. Social structures that enabled Clovis groups to maintain cultural coherence across vast distances likely included kinship systems that facilitated interaction between normally dispersed populations. Exogamy, requirements that mandated marriage outside immediate family groups, would have created networks of kinship relationships extending across multiple band territories. These kinship connections provided frameworks for cooperation, resource sharing, and information exchange that transcended the boundaries of individual residential groups. Seasonal aggregation sites where multiple bands gathered for communal hunting or social activities served crucial functions in maintaining Clovis cultural integration. These gatherings provided opportunities for young adults to find marriage partners outside their natal groups, for specialists to share technological innovations, and for leaders to coordinate activities across larger territorial areas. The social activities that occurred during these aggregations likely included ceremonies, competitions, and exchanges that reinforced cultural identity while facilitating the spread of new ideas and technologies. Leadership structures within Clovis society probably emphasized situational authority based on expertise and experience, rather than permanent hierarchical positions. Successful megafauna hunting required coordination by individuals with detailed knowledge of animal behavior, hunting techniques, and group management skills. These hunt leaders would have possessed temporary authority during hunting episodes, while deferring to other specialists in different contexts such as tool manufacture, route planning, or resource processing. The decision-making processes that governed Clovis group movements and resource utilization likely involved consensus-building mechanisms that incorporated input from multiple individuals with relevant expertise, choices about when and where to move, which resources to exploit, and how to respond to environmental challenges would have required integration of diverse knowledge sets, including weather patterns, animal behaviour, resource availability, and social obligations to other groups. The success of Clovis adaptations across diverse environments suggests that these decision-making processes were highly effective at incorporating relevant information and producing appropriate responses to changing circumstances. Conflict resolution mechanisms within Clovis society must have been sophisticated enough to maintain group cohesion, despite the stresses associated with mobile lifestyles and resource competition. The small size of typical Clovis bands would have made internal conflicts particularly disruptive, necessitating social mechanisms that could address disputes before they threatened group survival. The apparent absence of defensive features at Clovis sites suggests that intergroup violence was relatively uncommon, possibly reflecting effective territorial agreements and resource-sharing arrangements that minimised competition between different bands. The remarkable success of Clovis populations in colonising and exploiting North American environments within such a brief time period reflects the effectiveness of their social and settlement systems in adapting to diverse and challenging conditions. Their ability to maintain technological standardization while remaining flexible enough to exploit varying resource bases demonstrates sophisticated organizational capabilities that enabled rapid expansion across an entire continent. These achievements established the foundation for all subsequent human occupation of North America, creating precedents for mobile hunting adaptations that would influence indigenous cultures for millennia to come. The sophisticated social organization and settlement patterns that enabled Clovis groups to thrive across North America were supported by an equally remarkable array of material technologies that extended far beyond their famous stone projectile points. Archaeological evidence reveals that these early Americans possessed comprehensive knowledge of organic material manipulation, creating tools from bone, antler, wood, and plant fibers that were essential for their mobile lifestyle and diverse subsistence activities. The preservation of these perishable materials at select sites provides rare glimpses into the full technological repertoire that made Clovis adaptations possible across the continent's varied environments. Bone tool technology among Clovis populations demonstrates sophisticated understanding of skeletal anatomy and material properties that allowed craftsmen to select optimal elements for specific functions. Long bones from large mammals provided raw materials for awls, needles, and piercing implements that were essential for hide-working and composite tool construction. The dense cortical bone of mammoth and bison femurs could be shaped into durable points and cutting edges that maintained sharp working surfaces through extended use. Rib bones offered curved surfaces ideal for creating scrapers and smoothing tools, while smaller elements like metapodials provided compact blanks for specialized implements. The manufacturing process for bone tools began with careful selection of appropriate skeletal elements, often involving systematic breaking of fresh bones to access specific portions with desired characteristics. Clovis toolmakers demonstrated detailed knowledge of bone structure, consistently choosing sections that combined optimal workability with functional durability. The initial shaping of bone blanks typically involved controlled fracturing techniques that split bones along natural grain lines, creating rough forms that could be refined through systematic grinding and polishing. Grinding techniques employed by Clovis bone workers utilized abrasive stones to shape and finish implements with remarkable precision. Archaeological evidence from sites like Blackwater Draw preserves grinding stones with distinctive wear patterns indicating their use in bone tool manufacture. These implements show polished grooves and abraded surfaces that match the dimensions and curvature of finished bone tools, providing direct evidence for the manufacturing techniques employed. The systematic nature of these wear patterns suggests that bone tool production followed standardized procedures that produced consistent results across different sites and regions. Antler represented another crucial organic material that Clovis craftsmen exploited for specialized tool production. The unique properties of antler, combining the hardness of bone with greater flexibility and impact resistance, made it ideal for implements that required durability under stress. Pressure flaking tools manufactured from antler tines provided the precise control necessary for producing the thin, sharp edges characteristic of Clovis stone tools. These implements, typically measuring 15 to 25 centimeters in length, featured carefully shaped working ends that could apply controlled force to specific points on stone tool edges. The seasonal availability of shed antler from deer, elk, and caribou provided Clovis groups with renewable sources of high-quality tool materials that did not require killing valuable game animals. Antler collection likely formed part of regular seasonal activities, with groups systematically gathering shed materials during spring months when male ungulates naturally dropped their antlers. This renewable resource base allowed for intensive tool production without depleting game populations that provided essential protein resources. Antler tool manufacturing involved sophisticated techniques for separating usable sections from complete antlers while preserving the structural integrity of individual tines. Clovis craftsmen employed controlled splitting methods that followed natural grain lines in the antler structure, creating blanks that retained maximum strength while providing appropriate dimensions for specific tool types. The dense base sections of antlers provided materials for heavy-duty implements like digging sticks and prying tools, while the more flexible tine sections were ideal for delicate work requiring precision and control. Hide processing equipment represents one of the most crucial categories of Clovis organic technology. A successful leather production was essential for clothing, shelter, and container manufacture in the diverse climatic conditions these groups encountered. Archaeological evidence for hide processing activities includes specialized stone scrapers with distinctive wear patterns, bone fleshing tools, and grinding implements used for preparing organic materials involved in tanning processes. The systematic organization of hide processing areas at sites like Galt indicates that leather production required substantial time investments and specialized knowledge of complex chemical and physical processes. The hide processing sequence began with careful removal of skins from freshly killed animals, using sharp stone knives designed to minimize damage to valuable hide materials. Clovis butchering techniques, evidenced by cut mark patterns on bones from kill sites, demonstrate systematic approaches that maximized hide quality while efficiently removing meat and other useful materials. The positioning and orientation of cut marks indicate that Clovis hunters possessed detailed anatomical knowledge that allowed them to separate hides with minimal waste or damage. Fleshing operations, which removed residual meat and fat from fresh hides, required specialized tools capable of scraping organic materials without cutting through the leather substrate. Bone and antler fleshing tools found at Clovis sites feature carefully shaped working edges with specific angles optimized for efficient material removal. These implements often show distinctive wear patterns including polish and microchipping that result from contact with fresh hide materials. The standardized forms of these tools across different sites suggest that hide processing techniques were shared widely among Clovis populations. Brain tanning, a sophisticated leather processing technique that produces soft, flexible hides suitable for clothing manufacture, likely formed a crucial component of Clovis hide processing technology. This method involves applying brain tissue, which contains natural enzymes and oils, to prepared hides through systematic rubbing and working processes. Archaeological evidence for brain tanning among Clovis groups remains limited due to poor preservation of organic materials, but the quality of leather products inferred from archaeological contexts suggests that advanced tanning techniques were employed. Smoking processes that preserved tanned hides and provided water resistance were probably accomplished using controlled fires that produced dense smoke without excessive heat. Archaeological evidence for smoking activities includes fire hearths with distinctive configurations designed to produce sustained low-temperature combustion. These features often contain specific wood types that generate appropriate smoke characteristics for hide treatment, indicating that Clovis groups possessed detailed knowledge of wood properties and combustion requirements. Fire-making technology among Clovis populations involves sophisticated understanding of combustible materials and ignition techniques that could produce reliable flames under diverse environmental conditions. Archaeological evidence for fire-making equipment includes specialized stone tools with distinctive wear patterns indicating their use in fire production activities. These implements typically feature abraded surfaces and impact damage consistent with use in friction-based fire starting methods that generate sparks or glowing tinder materials. Fire drill technology, which produces ignition through friction between rotating wooden implements and stationary fireboards, required carefully selected wood types with specific density and resin characteristics. Clovis firemakers likely maintained detailed knowledge of regional wood species and their suitability for different aspects of fire production. Hardwood drill components needed sufficient density to generate adequate friction heat, while softwood fireboards required appropriate texture to produce combustible dust particles during drilling operations. Tinder preparation represented another crucial aspect of Clovis fire technology, involving systematic collection and processing of plant materials that could catch sparks and sustain initial combustion. Archaeological evidence suggests that Clovis groups utilized various fibrous plant materials, including inner bark, dried grasses, and fungal materials that possessed optimal ignition characteristics. The processing of these materials often involved systematic shredding and drying techniques that maximize surface area and combustibility. Artistic expression among Clovis populations, while limited in the archaeological record due to preservation issues, demonstrates sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities and possible symbolic behavior that extended beyond purely functional considerations. Carved bone artifacts from several sites display decorative elements that appear to serve no utilitarian purpose, suggesting that Clovis craftsmen invested time and skill in creating objects with aesthetic or symbolic significance. These decorated items often feature geometric patterns, incised lines, and carefully executed surface modifications that required substantial technical skill to produce. The Anzick burial site in Montana provides exceptional evidence for Clovis artistic expression through its collection of red ochre-stained artifacts associated with the burial of an infant. The presence of ochre, a naturally occurring iron oxide pigment, indicates that Clovis groups attributed symbolic significance to certain colours and materials. The systematic application of ochre to burial goods suggests ritualized behaviour that involved specific beliefs about death, afterlife, or spiritual relationships between humans and the material world. Decorated tool handles and weapon components found at various Clovis sites display incised patterns and carved elements that enhanced both aesthetic appeal and functional grip characteristics. These decorative modifications often follow geometric patterns that appear across multiple sites, suggesting shared artistic traditions that were transmitted along with technological knowledge. The investment of additional labour required to create these decorative elements indicates that Clovis groups valued aesthetic considerations even within their highly mobile lifestyle. Possible symbolic behaviour among Clovis populations extends beyond decorated artefacts to include potential ritualized treatment of certain animal remains and systematic organisation of cache deposits. Some megafauna kill sites preserve evidence for specific bone arrangements that appear to exceed functional requirements for butchering or processing activities. These patterns might reflect symbolic relationships between humans and the animals they hunted, though alternative explanations related to practical considerations cannot be definitively ruled out. Clothing technology among Clovis groups necessarily involves sophisticated tailoring techniques adapted to the diverse climatic conditions encountered across their continental range. Archaeological evidence for clothing construction includes bone needles, awls, and cutting implements specifically designed for working with leather and other textile materials. These tools often show distinctive wear patterns indicating their use in sewing, piercing and cutting operations associated with garment manufacture. Needle technology required exceptional skill in bone working, as functional sewing implements demanded precise shaping of eye holes and point configurations that could penetrate leather materials without tearing. Clovis bone needles, preserved at sites with exceptional organic preservation, display remarkably sophisticated manufacturing techniques, including systematic grinding, polishing and perforation methods. The standardized dimensions and proportions of these implements across different sites indicate shared technological traditions for clothing construction. Thread and cordage production likely utilize plant fibers, animal sinews and possibly hair materials that could be processed into strong, flexible strands suitable for sewing applications. Archaeological evidence for cordage production includes specialized tools for fiber processing and twisting operations that converted raw materials into usable thread. The systematic processing of plant fibers required detailed botanical knowledge and sophisticated techniques for extracting, cleaning and preparing organic materials. Garment design among Clovis populations probably emphasized functionality and thermal efficiency, while accommodating the mobility requirements of their lifestyle. Clothing needed to provide protection against diverse weather conditions, while allowing freedom of movement during hunting and travel activities. The tailored fit necessary for effective cold weather protection required sophisticated pattern-making skills and detailed understanding of human anatomy and movement requirements. Shelter construction technology among Clovis groups involved portable structures that could be quickly erected and dismantled to accommodate their mobile lifestyle. Archaeological evidence for shelter construction includes post holes, hearth configurations, and artifact distributions that indicate organized living spaces with specific architectural features. These structures typically utilized organic materials including wooden frames, hide coverings, and plant materials that provided weather protection while remaining transportable. Framework construction for Clovis shelters likely employed flexible wooden poles that could be bent and lashed together to create dome-shaped or conical structures. The selection of appropriate wood species required knowledge of material properties including flexibility, strength, and availability in different environmental zones. Willow, birch, and other species with suitable bending characteristics were probably preferred for framework construction, while larger structural elements might have utilized stronger hardwood species. Hide covering systems for Clovis shelters involved sophisticated techniques for joining multiple animal skins into large, weather-resistant coverings that could enclose substantial interior spaces. The sewing and lashing methods required to create these coverings demanded extensive cordage and specialized tools for working with thick leather materials. The standardized sizes and configurations of shelter coverings inferred from archaeological evidence suggest that construction techniques were shared widely among different groups. Adaptation strategies for diverse North American environments required Clovis groups to modify their material technologies according to local resource availability and climatic conditions. Arctic and subarctic regions demanded specialized cold weather equipment, including insulated clothing, efficient heating systems, and shelter designs optimized for snow and wind conditions. Desert environments required different adaptations, emphasizing water conservation, heat protection, and efficient resource utilization in areas with limited organic materials. Coastal adaptations among some Clovis groups involved technologies for exploiting marine and aquatic resources that supplemented terrestrial hunting activities. Archaeological evidence from coastal sites includes specialized tools for processing fish and shellfish, possible watercraft components, and equipment designed for intertidal resource collection. These adaptations required detailed knowledge of marine ecosystems and seasonal patterns that affected resource availability. Mountain environments presented unique challenges that required specialized equipment for high-altitude travel and resource exploitation. Clovis groups operating in mountainous regions needed tools and techniques adapted to steep terrain, extreme weather conditions, and the specific plant and animal communities found at different elevations. The distribution of Clovis sites across various elevational zones indicates successful adaptation to these challenging environments. Food processing techniques among Clovis populations extended far beyond the megafauna hunting activities that dominate archaeological discussions, to include sophisticated methods for exploiting plant resources and smaller animal species. Archaeological evidence for plant processing includes grinding stones, mortars, and specialized cutting implements designed for working with various botanical materials. These tools often show distinctive wear patterns indicating their use in systematic processing of seeds, nuts, roots, and other plant foods. Grinding technology for plant processing utilized carefully selected stones with appropriate surface textures and hardness characteristics for reducing various plant materials to usable forms. Grinding stones from Clovis sites often show evidence for processing multiple plant types, indicating that these groups exploited diverse botanical resources according to seasonal availability and nutritional requirements. The systematic maintenance and transport of grinding equipment demonstrates the importance of plant foods in Clovis subsistence strategies. Nut processing techniques required specialized tools for cracking hard shells while preserving valuable nut meats that provided essential fats and proteins. Archaeological evidence includes anvil stones with distinctive pitting patterns indicating their use in nut processing activities, along with hammerstones sized appropriately for controlled cracking operations. The seasonal timing of nut processing activities likely coincided with fall harvesting periods, when these resources reached optimal nutritional content. Root and tuber processing involved digging implements designed for efficient extraction of underground plant storage organs that provided important carbohydrate resources. Specialized digging sticks manufactured from hardwood or antler materials featured pointed ends and leverage configurations that facilitated systematic excavation of buried plant resources. The systematic exploitation of root resources required detailed botanical knowledge and understanding of seasonal growth cycles that determined optimal harvesting times. Seed processing technologies included specialized tools for removing husks, grinding hard seed coats, and preparing various grass and forb seeds for consumption. Archaeological evidence suggests that Clovis groups systematically exploited wild grass seeds and other small-seeded plants that required intensive processing to access nutritional content. These activities demanded substantial labor investments, but provided reliable carbohydrate sources that supplemented hunting returns. The broader subsistence economy of Clovis populations encompassed systematic exploitation of diverse resource bases that provided nutritional security beyond the spectacular megafauna hunting activities preserved at kill sites. Small game hunting likely provided consistent protein sources that could be obtained through individual or small group efforts, without the coordination requirements of megafauna hunting. Archaeological evidence includes projectile points and processing tools specifically designed for hunting and processing smaller mammals, birds, and other animals. Bird hunting among Clovis groups involved specialized techniques and equipment adapted to the behavioral characteristics and seasonal patterns of various avian species. Waterfowl hunting during migration periods could provide substantial protein resources along with feathers, bones, and other useful materials. The systematic exploitation of bird resources required detailed knowledge of migration timing, habitat preferences, and effective hunting techniques for different species. Fish and aquatic resource exploitation formed important components of Clovis subsistence strategies in appropriate environmental contexts. Archaeological evidence from sites near rivers, lakes, and coastal areas includes specialized tools for fish processing and possible equipment for aquatic hunting or trapping activities. The systematic utilization of aquatic resources required knowledge of seasonal fish runs, spawning behaviors, and effective capture techniques. Seasonal resource scheduling among Clovis populations involved sophisticated planning that coordinated the exploitation of different resource types according to their availability patterns and nutritional characteristics. Spring activities emphasized fresh plant growth and animal reproduction cycles that provided high-quality resources after winter scarcity periods. Summer resource exploitation focused on diverse plant foods and smaller animals that supplemented stored winter provisions. Fall resource acquisition emphasized intensive harvesting and processing activities that produced storable foods for winter consumption. These activities included large-scale nut processing, intensive hunting of animals with peak fat content, and systematic collection of plant materials suitable for long-term storage. The coordination of these activities required detailed environmental knowledge and sophisticated planning capabilities. Winter subsistence strategies relied heavily on stored resources and cached materials that had been accumulated during more productive seasons. The successful management of winter food supplies required careful rationing, effective storage techniques, and contingency planning for periods of resource scarcity. Archaeological evidence suggests that Clovis groups maintained diverse winter resource bases that provided security against unpredictable environmental conditions. The sophisticated material culture and daily life practices that characterize Clovis populations were expressed across a geographic range that encompassed virtually the entire North American continent, from the ice-free corridors of Alaska to the tropical environments of northern South America. This extraordinary distribution represents one of the most rapid and extensive cultural expansions in human prehistory, achieved within a time span of less than 700 years. Archaeological evidence reveals that Clovis technology and cultural practices spread across approximately 4.5 million square kilometers, adapting to environments ranging from Arctic tundra to subtropical forests, while maintaining remarkable technological consistency across vast distances. The northernmost Clovis sites extend into Alaska and the Yukon Territory, where groups adapted their technologies to harsh subarctic conditions characterized by extreme seasonal temperature variations and limited growing seasons. The Broken Mammoth site in central Alaska preserves evidence of Clovis occupation dating to approximately 13,000 years ago, featuring distinctive fluted points associated with hearth features and tool manufacturing debris. The lithic assemblage from this site demonstrates adaptations to local raw material sources, including extensive use of high-quality chert from regional geological formations that provided alternatives to the exotic materials commonly transported across great distances in more southern regions. Alaskan Clovis sites reveal modifications in settlement patterns that reflect adaptations to extreme northern environments. Sites tend to be located in sheltered valley locations that provided protection from harsh winds while offering access to reliable water sources and game migration routes. The distribution of these northern sites follows major river systems that served as natural corridors for both human movement and animal migrations, creating predictable zones of resource concentration that could support human populations during brief summer seasons. The technological adaptations evident at northern Clovis sites include modifications in tool design and manufacturing techniques that accommodated the specific challenges of Arctic and subarctic environments. Projectile points from these regions tend to be more robust than their southern counterparts, with thicker cross-sections and reinforced hafting areas that could withstand the extreme stresses associated with hunting large Arctic mammals. The presence of specialized cold weather equipment including evidence for sophisticated fire-making technologies and possible Arctic clothing adaptations, demonstrates the remarkable flexibility of Clovis cultural systems. Moving southward, the Great Plains region contains the highest density of Clovis sites anywhere in North America, reflecting both optimal environmental conditions for preservation and the exceptional abundance of resources that supported substantial Clovis populations. The Llano Estacado of eastern New Mexico and western Texas alone contains over 50 documented Clovis localities, creating a concentration of archaeological sites unmatched anywhere else on the continent. This density pattern reflects the optimal combination of abundant megafauna populations, extensive high-quality lithic resources, and environmental conditions that favoured both human occupation and archaeological preservation. Plains Clovis sites demonstrate the most intensive megafauna hunting activities documented anywhere in the archaeological record. Sites like Blackwater Draw, Murray Springs and Lena preserve evidence for systematic mammoth and bison hunting that involves sophisticated coordinated strategies and intensive carcass processing activities. The artefact assemblages from these sites include the largest and most elaborate Clovis points known, with some specimens exceeding 15 centimetres in length and displaying exceptional craftsmanship that represents the pinnacle of Clovis lithic technology. The morphological characteristics of Plains Clovis points reflect adaptations to the specific requirements of megafauna hunting in open grassland environments. These implements typically feature broad, robust blades with reinforced tips capable of penetrating the thick hides and dense musculature of mammoth and mastodon. The fluting on plains specimens tends to be particularly well executed, with channels extending up to 2/3 the length of the point and demonstrating the exceptional skill levels achieved by craftsmen in this region. Regional variations in Plains Clovis technology also reflect adaptations to local raw material sources and environmental conditions. Sites in the Colorado Piedmont show extensive use of high-quality Alibates chert obtained from sources in the Texas Panhandle, indicating trade networks or territorial ranges that extended across hundreds of kilometers. The systematic exploitation of these premium raw materials demonstrates the sophisticated logistical planning that enabled Plains Clovis groups to maintain technological standards despite the challenges of resource procurement across vast distances. Eastern North America presents a dramatically different pattern of Clovis site distribution, with occupations scattered across diverse forested environments from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast. The lower density of eastern sites compared to plains concentrations likely reflects both environmental factors that influence preservation and different settlement strategies adapted to forested environments with more dispersed resource bases. Eastern Clovis sites tend to occur in association with major river systems, wetland margins, and other landscape features that concentrated resources in otherwise heavily forested regions. The Shawnee Minisink site in Pennsylvania exemplifies Eastern Clovis adaptations to riverine environments that provided access to diverse aquatic and terrestrial resources. Excavations at this site revealed evidence for systematic exploitation of fish, waterfowl, and plant resources alongside more traditional Clovis hunting activities. The artefact assemblage includes specialized tools for processing aquatic resources and plant materials, demonstrating the technological flexibility that enabled Eastern Clovis groups to exploit diverse resource bases. Morphological variations in Eastern Clovis points reflect adaptations to forested hunting environments, where different strategies were required for pursuing game in dense vegetation. Eastern specimens tend to be smaller and more finely crafted than their plains counterparts, with thinner cross-sections and more delicate fluting that reflects different functional requirements. The reduced size and weight of eastern points may reflect adaptations to hunting smaller game species, or the need for improved accuracy in forested environments where shot distances were limited by vegetation. The Thunderbird site in Virginia provides exceptional evidence for Eastern Clovis lithic procurement strategies through its diverse assemblage of raw materials obtained from sources scattered across the Appalachian region. Chemical sourcing studies reveal that toolmakers at this site utilized materials from at least 8 different geological sources located across a region spanning 400 kilometers. This pattern indicates either extensive territorial ranges or sophisticated exchange networks that provided access to high-quality lithic materials, despite the challenges of transport through heavily forested terrain. Southeastern Clovis sites reveal adaptations to warm, humid environments that supported different plant and animal communities than those found in northern regions. Sites like Page-Ladson in Florida preserve evidence for Clovis occupation in association with mastodon, remains in underwater contexts that provide exceptional preservation of organic materials. These sites demonstrate that Clovis groups successfully adapted their technologies and subsistence strategies to subtropical environments while maintaining the distinctive cultural characteristics that define the tradition. The morphology of southeastern Clovis points shows subtle but consistent differences from specimens found in other regions, including modifications in blade proportions and fluting characteristics that may reflect local stylistic preferences or functional adaptations. Southeastern points often feature more pronounced basal concavity and distinctive edge beveling that creates asymmetrical cross-sections. These modifications may represent regional traditions that developed within the broader Clovis technological framework, while maintaining overall consistency with continental patterns. Western North America presents perhaps the most diverse range of Clovis adaptations, with sites distributed across environments ranging from Pacific coastal regions to high-elevation mountain valleys. The complex topography and diverse environmental zones of the western regions created opportunities for specialized adaptations, while presenting challenges for maintaining cultural connections across fragmented landscapes. Western Clovis sites often occur in association with distinctive geological features that provided access to high-quality lithic resources or strategic advantages for hunting activities. The East Wenatchee site in Washington state demonstrates Western Clovis adaptations to mountainous environments through its remarkable cache of tools manufactured from exotic materials obtained from sources scattered across the Pacific Northwest. The implements in this cache display exceptional craftsmanship and include some of the most elaborate Clovis points known anywhere, suggesting that Western groups achieve particularly high levels of technological sophistication. The investment of labour required to produce such exceptional tools indicates that Western Clovis groups allocated substantial time and resources to technological activities. Coastal Clovis adaptations along the Pacific shore involve technologies for exploiting marine and estuarine resources that supplemented terrestrial hunting activities. Sites on the Channel Islands off California preserve evidence for early maritime adaptations that included sophisticated watercraft technology and systematic exploitation of marine mammals. These coastal adaptations demonstrate the remarkable flexibility of Clovis cultural systems in responding to diverse environmental opportunities while maintaining technological and cultural coherence. The relationship between Clovis and contemporary archaeological cultures provides insights into the cultural dynamics of late Pleistocene North America and the processes through which different technological traditions developed and spread. The Folsom culture, which succeeded Clovis across much of the Great Plains after 12,800 years ago, represents a clear technological continuation that maintained many Clovis characteristics while developing distinctive innovations adapted to changing environmental conditions following megafauna extinctions. Folsom projectile points exhibit clear technological relationships to Clovis prototypes, while displaying distinctive modifications that reflect adaptations to different hunting requirements. Folsom points feature more extensive fluting that often extends the full length of the implement, creating extremely thin cross-sections that required exceptional manufacturing skill to produce successfully. The development of this enhanced fluting technology represents a technological intensification that built upon Clovis innovations while pushing lithic manufacturing techniques to new levels of sophistication. The temporal and geographic overlap between late Clovis and early Folsom occupations suggests a gradual transition rather than abrupt replacement of one culture by another. Sites in the southwestern United States preserve stratigraphic sequences that document this transition through gradual modifications in point morphology and manufacturing techniques. The continuity evident in these sequences indicates that Folsom technology developed from Clovis antecedents through evolutionary processes rather than representing an entirely separate cultural tradition. Contemporary cultures in other regions show varying degrees of relationship to Clovis technological traditions, reflecting the complex cultural dynamics of late Pleistocene North America. The Gainey culture of the Great Lakes region exhibits clear Clovis affinities in projectile point technology, while displaying distinctive regional characteristics in other tool categories. Gainey points feature Clovis-style fluting and overall morphology, but tend to be manufactured from different raw materials and show subtle variations in proportional relationships. The redstone culture of the Arctic and subarctic regions represents another contemporary tradition that shares certain characteristics with Clovis, while maintaining distinctive regional features. Redstone points exhibit fluting similar to Clovis specimens, but feature different basal configurations and proportional relationships that reflect adaptations to northern environments and hunting requirements. The relationship between redstone and Clovis traditions remains unclear, with some researchers arguing for direct derivation while others propose independent development of similar technologies. Site preservation issues significantly influence our understanding of Clovis geographic distribution and create biases that affect interpretations of settlement patterns and population densities. The archaeological visibility of Clovis occupations varies dramatically across different environmental zones, with preservation conditions in some regions providing excellent opportunities for site discovery, while other areas offer limited potential for archaeological detection of ancient occupations. Arid and semi-arid regions of the American Southwest provide optimal preservation conditions for Clovis sites through low precipitation levels that minimize chemical weathering and erosion processes that could destroy archaeological deposits. The alkaline soils characteristic of these regions also favor preservation of bone and other organic materials that provide crucial evidence for Clovis subsistence activities and technological practices. The high visibility of artifacts in desert environments facilitates site discovery and creates sampling biases that may overrepresent Clovis occupation of arid regions. Forested regions of eastern North America present significant challenges for Clovis site preservation and discovery through acidic soil conditions that destroy bone materials and dense vegetation that obscures surface artifacts. The deep soil development characteristic of forested environments often buries archaeological deposits beneath substantial overburden that makes site detection difficult without systematic subsurface testing. These preservation and visibility issues likely result in significant underrepresentation of eastern Clovis populations in the archaeological record. Coastal regions present particular challenges for understanding Clovis distributions due to sea level changes that have submerged many potential sites beneath modern ocean waters. The 120-metre sea level rise that occurred following the end of the Pleistocene placed vast areas of former coastline beneath the continental shelves, removing potential Clovis sites from archaeological accessibility. The few coastal Clovis sites that remain accessible on modern land surfaces may represent only a small fraction of the original coastal occupation pattern. Glaciated regions of northern North America experienced substantial landscape modifications following ice sheet retreat that destroyed or deeply buried many potential Clovis sites. The complex depositional and erosional processes associated with glacial retreat created geological contexts that are unfavourable for archaeological preservation and site detection. The apparent scarcity of Clovis sites in formerly glaciated regions may reflect these preservation issues rather than actual absence of ancient human occupation. Alluvial environments along major river systems present both opportunities and challenges for Clovis site preservation. Floodplain deposits can provide excellent preservation conditions for archaeological materials while simultaneously burying sites beneath substantial sediment accumulations that make discovery difficult. The dynamic nature of river systems also creates erosional processes that can destroy sites while exposing others, resulting in complex preservation patterns that influence archaeological sampling. The systematic biases created by differential preservation and site visibility significantly affect interpretations of Clovis settlement patterns and population distributions. Regions with optimal preservation conditions may appear to have supported much higher population densities than areas where preservation is poor, creating false impressions of prehistoric demographic patterns. These biases must be considered when interpreting the geographic distribution of Clovis sites and drawing conclusions about settlement preferences and population densities. Recent advances in archaeological survey techniques and site detection methods are beginning to address some of these preservation and visibility issues through systematic approaches that can identify buried sites and recognise archaeological deposits in challenging environmental contexts. Remote sensing technologies, geophysical survey methods, and systematic subsurface testing programs are revealing Clovis sites in regions where traditional survey approaches had failed to detect ancient occupations. The application of these advanced techniques is gradually filling gaps in our understanding of Clovis geographic distribution, while revealing the true extent of regional variations in settlement patterns and technological adaptations. As more sites are discovered and investigated using modern archaeological methods, our understanding of Clovis cultural geography continues to evolve, revealing increasingly complex patterns of adaptation and regional variation across the North American continent. The remarkable geographic distribution and regional adaptations that characterize Clovis culture across North America would face their ultimate test during one of the most dramatic climatic episodes in Earth's recent history. Beginning approximately 12,900 years ago, a sudden and severe cooling event known as the Younger Dryas transformed the environmental conditions that had supported Clovis populations for nearly 6 centuries. This climatic reversal, lasting until approximately 11,700 years ago, brought glacial conditions back to much of northern North America, just as the continent appeared to be emerging from the grip of the last ice age. The environmental challenges posed by this climatic catastrophe would fundamentally alter the trajectory of human cultural development across the Americas. The onset of the Younger Dryas occurred with startling rapidity, with paleoclimatic evidence indicating that average temperatures dropped by 8 to 15 degrees Celsius across much of North America within the span of just a few decades. Ice core data from Greenland reveals that this transition happened so quickly that individual annual layers preserve the progression from warm to cold conditions, suggesting that the climate system crossed a critical threshold that triggered rapid reorganization of atmospheric and oceanic circulation patterns. The speed of this transition would have presented unprecedented challenges for human populations that had adapted their settlement patterns and subsistence strategies to the relatively stable warming trend that had characterized the preceding millennium. The geographic extent of Younger Dryas cooling encompassed virtually the entire North American continent, though the magnitude of temperature depression varied significantly across different regions. The most severe impacts occurred in the northern and eastern portions of the continent, where advancing ice sheets and permafrost expansion created conditions comparable to those that had existed during the height of the last glacial maximum. The Great Lakes region experienced particularly dramatic changes, with ice sheets advancing southward from Canada to reoccupy areas that had been ice-free for several thousand years. Vegetation patterns across North America underwent massive reorganization in response to the rapid cooling and increased aridity that characterized the Younger Dryas period. Spruce and fir forests that had been expanding northward during the preceding warm interval were forced to retreat southward, while grassland and steppe vegetation expanded across much of the continental interior. The mixed deciduous forests that had been developing across the eastern United States contracted dramatically, replaced by boreal species adapted to colder conditions and shorter growing seasons. The speed of these vegetation changes created ecological disruptions that cascaded through entire food webs, affecting both plant and animal communities that had provided essential resources for Clovis populations. Paleobotanical evidence from sites across the continent documents the disappearance of many plant species that had formed important components of late Pleistocene ecosystems, while others shifted their geographic ranges by hundreds of kilometers within just a few centuries. These rapid changes in plant communities disrupted the seasonal resource scheduling that had enabled Clovis groups to maintain their mobile lifestyle across vast territories. Pollen records from lake sediments and bog deposits provide detailed documentation of vegetation responses to Younger Dryas, cooling across different regions of North America. In the Great Plains, grassland species that had supported large herbivore populations gave way to sparse, cold-adapted vegetation that could support much lower animal biomass. The productive parkland environments that had characterized the transition zones between forests and grasslands largely disappeared, replaced by more homogeneous vegetation communities with reduced species diversity and lower overall productivity. The eastern deciduous forests that have been expanding across much of the southeastern United States experienced dramatic contractions as cold-adapted conifers advanced from northern refugia. Oak, hickory, and other deciduous species that had provided important nut crops for human populations retreated to small refugial areas in the southern Appalachians and Gulf coastal plain. The loss of these productive forest ecosystems eliminated crucial plant resources that had supplemented hunting returns and provided essential carbohydrates for human populations. Animal populations responded to these vegetation changes through complex patterns of migration, population decline, and local extinction that fundamentally altered the resource base available to human hunters. The massive herds of megafauna that had characterized late Pleistocene North America began experiencing severe population stress as their preferred habitats disappeared or became fragmented. Mammoth populations, already under pressure from human hunting activities, faced additional challenges as the grassland and parkland environments they required contracted dramatically across their former ranges. The timing of megafauna extinctions across North America corresponds closely with the onset of Younger Dryas cooling, though disentangling the relative contributions of climatic stress and human hunting pressure remains one of the most contentious issues in Pleistocene archaeology. Radiocarbon dates from the latest mammoth remains indicate that most populations disappeared between 12,900 and 12,400 years ago, coinciding precisely with the initial cooling phase of the Younger Dryas. Mastodon populations persisted somewhat longer in eastern North America, with the latest reliable dates extending to approximately 12,000 years ago in the Great Lakes region. Ground sloth populations also experienced severe declines during the early Younger Dryas, with most species disappearing from the fossil record by 12,500 years ago. These large herbivores, which had been important prey species for some Clovis groups, appear to have been particularly vulnerable to the combined effects of habitat loss and human predation. The disappearance of ground sloths from their former ranges eliminated a significant protein source that had been available to human populations in many regions. Large predator populations faced cascading effects as their prey species declined or disappeared entirely. Short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, and dire wolves all experienced population crashes during the early Younger Dryas as the megafauna communities that had supported them collapsed. The elimination of these large predators reduced competition for remaining prey species, but also removed scavenging opportunities that may have provided supplementary resources for human populations. Smaller mammal populations showed more complex responses to Younger Dryas environmental changes, with some species benefiting from reduced competition while others suffered from habitat loss. Caribou and elk populations may have initially increased as their preferred cold-adapted habitats expanded, though these gains were likely temporary as overall ecosystem productivity declined. Bison populations appear to have maintained viable numbers in some regions, particularly in the Great Plains, where grassland habitats persisted despite overall cooling trends. Bird populations experienced dramatic shifts in distribution and abundance as their preferred habitats underwent rapid transformation. Waterfowl species that had utilized the extensive wetland systems of late Pleistocene North America faced challenges as many water bodies froze for extended periods or dried up entirely due to increased aridity. Migratory bird populations that had provided seasonal protein sources for human groups experienced disrupted migration patterns as traditional stopover sites became unavailable. The proposed extraterrestrial impact hypothesis has emerged as one of the most controversial explanations for the rapid onset of Younger Dryas cooling and associated environmental changes. This hypothesis suggests that a cosmic impact event, possibly involving multiple airbursts or surface impacts from a fragmented comet, occurred approximately 12,900 years ago and triggered the climatic cooling that characterized the Younger Dryas period. Proponents argue that such an impact could explain both the rapid onset of cooling and the apparent synchroneity of megafauna extinctions across North America. Evidence cited in support of the impact hypothesis includes the presence of microscopic diamonds, magnetic spherules, and other exotic materials in sedimentary layers dating to the Younger Dryas boundary at sites across North America and Europe. These materials, according to impact proponents, represent the signature of high-temperature, high-pressure processes that could only result from cosmic impact events. The geographic distribution of these materials suggests that the proposed impact may have involved multiple fragments that struck across a wide area of the North American continent. Supporters of the impact hypothesis argue that such an event could have triggered massive wildfires across North America, as evidenced by widespread charcoal deposits and soot layers found in Younger Dryas boundary sediments. These fires would have destroyed vast areas of vegetation and released enormous quantities of smoke and particulates into the atmosphere, potentially blocking solar radiation and triggering rapid cooling. The scale of burning suggested by the charcoal evidence exceeds anything that could be explained by normal wildfire patterns, according to impact advocates. The timing of the proposed impact coincides closely with the disappearance of Clovis culture from the archaeological record, leading some researchers to suggest that the impact event may have directly affected human populations through environmental devastation and resource depletion. The rapid abandonment of many Clovis sites and the apparent discontinuity between Clovis and subsequent archaeological cultures has been interpreted as evidence for population crashes or cultural disruption resulting from impact-related environmental changes. Critics of the impact hypothesis have raised numerous objections to both the evidence and the proposed mechanisms for triggering Younger Dryas cooling. Alternative explanations for the exotic materials found in boundary sediments include terrestrial sources such as volcanic eruptions, wildfires, and normal cosmic dust accumulation. The microscopic diamonds cited as impact evidence have been found to occur naturally in many geological contexts, and may not require impact processes for their formation. The geographic distribution of proposed impact evidence shows significant inconsistencies that challenge the cosmic impact interpretation. Many sites that should contain impact signatures if the hypothesis were correct show no evidence for exotic materials or unusual environmental changes at the Younger Dryas boundary. The absence of impact evidence at these locations suggests that alternative explanations may be more appropriate for understanding the observed patterns. Alternative mechanisms for triggering Younger Dryas cooling focus primarily on changes in ocean circulation patterns that could have disrupted the transport of warm water to high latitudes. The collapse of the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which transports warm surface water northward and returns cold deep water southward, could have triggered rapid cooling across the North Atlantic region. This circulation system is known to be sensitive to fresh water inputs that can disrupt the density differences that drive deep water formation. Massive freshwater releases from glacial Lake Agassiz, which covered much of central Canada during the late Pleistocene, may have provided the trigger for circulation collapse and subsequent cooling. As climate warmed during the late Pleistocene, this enormous glacial lake accumulated vast quantities of meltwater that were periodically released into the ocean through different drainage routes. A particularly large release of fresh water into the North Atlantic approximately 12,900 years ago could have disrupted ocean circulation and triggered the Younger Dryas cooling event. Evidence for massive freshwater releases includes sedimentological indicators of catastrophic flooding along the drainage routes that connected Lake Agassiz to the Atlantic Ocean. The channeled scablands of eastern Washington preserve dramatic evidence for enormous floods that carved deep channels through solid bedrock, demonstrating the scale of water releases that occurred during glacial lake drainage events. Similar evidence exists for major flooding along the St. Lawrence River Valley, which served as another drainage route for Lake Agassiz. The timing of these drainage events corresponds closely with the onset of Younger Dryas cooling, supporting the hypothesis that freshwater releases triggered circulation changes that caused rapid climate deterioration. Computer models of ocean circulation demonstrate that freshwater inputs of the magnitude suggested by geological evidence could indeed disrupt the Atlantic circulation system and trigger cooling patterns similar to those observed during the Younger Dryas. Volcanic activity represents another potential trigger for Younger Dryas cooling through the injection of sulfur dioxide and particulates into the atmosphere. Large volcanic eruptions can cause temporary global cooling by reflecting solar radiation and altering atmospheric chemistry. The Lakers Sea eruption in Germany, which occurred approximately 12,900 years ago, has been proposed as a potential trigger for Younger Dryas cooling, though the scale of this eruption appears insufficient to explain the magnitude and duration of observed climate changes. Solar variability may have contributed to Younger Dryas cooling through reductions in solar irradiance that affected global energy budgets. Proxy records of solar activity suggest that solar output may have been reduced during the Younger Dryas period, though the magnitude of these changes appears too small to account for the observed cooling without amplification through feedback mechanisms in the climate system. Clovis populations responded to these environmental challenges through various adaptive strategies that reflected both the flexibility of their cultural systems and the constraints imposed by rapidly changing conditions. Archaeological evidence for these responses includes changes in settlement patterns, technological modifications, and apparent shifts in subsistence strategies that enabled some groups to survive the initial phases of environmental deterioration. Site abandonment patterns during the early Younger Dryas suggest that many Clovis groups were forced to abandon territories that had become unsuitable for human occupation due to resource depletion or climatic deterioration. The northern margins of Clovis distribution show particularly clear evidence for site abandonment, with many locations that had supported human occupation during the preceding warm period showing no evidence for continued use after 12,900 years ago. Technological responses to environmental challenges included modifications in tool design and manufacturing techniques that reflected changing resource availability and hunting requirements. Projectile points from late Clovis contexts show increased standardization and reduced size variation, possibly reflecting more intensive curation of lithic resources as high-quality raw materials became more difficult to obtain. The increased frequency of tool resharpening and recycling evident at some late Clovis sites suggests that groups were experiencing resource stress that required more intensive management of their technological inventories. Subsistence diversification appears to have been a crucial adaptive strategy for Clovis groups facing the collapse of megafauna populations and changing plant communities. Archaeological assemblages from late Clovis sites show increased emphasis on smaller game species and more intensive exploitation of plant resources, suggesting that groups were broadening their resource base in response to the disappearance of preferred prey species. The development of new hunting technologies adapted to smaller prey species may have enabled some groups to maintain viable subsistence strategies despite the loss of megafauna. Population responses to environmental stress likely included both demographic decline and geographic reorganization, as groups abandoned marginal territories and concentrated in areas with more reliable resource bases. The apparent discontinuity between Clovis and subsequent archaeological cultures suggests that many populations may not have survived the environmental challenges of the early Younger Dryas, though some groups clearly persisted and eventually developed the technological traditions that characterized post-Clovis cultures. Regional variation in adaptive responses reflects the diverse environmental conditions that different Clovis populations encountered during the Younger Dryas period. Groups in southern regions may have experienced less severe environmental stress and been able to maintain more traditional subsistence strategies, while northern populations faced more dramatic changes that required fundamental reorganization of their cultural systems. The differential survival of Clovis populations across different regions may have contributed to the regional diversity that characterized subsequent archaeological cultures. The social implications of environmental stress during the Younger Dryas likely included increased competition for diminishing resources and possible breakdown of the extensive social networks that had facilitated Clovis expansion across the continent. The territorial ranges that had enabled Clovis groups to maintain access to diverse resources and high-quality raw materials may have become unsustainable as environmental conditions deteriorated and population densities increased in remaining viable territories. The environmental catastrophes that mark the onset of the Younger Dryas period created conditions that would prove fatal not only for North America's spectacular megafauna populations, but also for the sophisticated hunting culture that had evolved to exploit them. Between approximately 12,900 and 12,400 years ago, the continent witnessed the most dramatic episode of large mammal extinctions in its geological history, with over 35 genera of megafauna disappearing forever from ecosystems that had supported them for millions of years. This extinction event coincided precisely with the final centuries of Clovis culture, creating one of archaeology's most compelling yet contentious debates about the relationship between human hunting practices and ecosystem collapse. The scale and selectivity of late Pleistocene extinctions in North America far exceeded similar events on other continents, suggesting that unique factors were operating in the Americas during this critical period. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, short-faced bears, American horses, camels, and dozens of other large mammal species vanished from the fossil record within a time span of less than 500 years. This represents an extinction rate approximately 100 times higher than the background rate that had characterized the preceding million years of Pleistocene history. The size-selective nature of these extinctions provides crucial insights into the mechanisms that drove species to extinction during this period. Virtually all mammals weighing more than 45 kilograms disappeared from North America, while smaller species showed much lower extinction rates. This pattern strongly suggests that body size itself was a critical factor determining survival, though the specific mechanisms linking large body size to extinction risk remain subjects of intense scientific debate. Radiocarbon dating of the latest megafauna remains reveals a complex temporal pattern of extinctions that unfolded across several centuries rather than representing a single catastrophic event. mammoth populations appear to have been among the first casualties, with most mainland populations disappearing between 12,900 and 12,700 years ago. Mastodon extinctions followed slightly later, with the latest reliable dates from the Great Lakes region extending to approximately 12,400 years ago. Ground sloths persisted somewhat longer in some regions, with terminal dates ranging from 12,600 to 12,000 years ago depending on species and geographic location. The chronological relationship between megafauna extinctions and Clovis archaeological sites provides compelling evidence for human involvement in these population collapses. Statistical analyses of radiocarbon dates from both archaeological and paleontological contexts reveal significant overlap between the final centuries of megafauna survival and the peak period of Clovis hunting activity. Sites like Blackwater Draw, Murray Springs and Lena preserve direct evidence for Clovis hunting of mammoth and mastodon during the precise time interval when these species were approaching extinction. The overkill hypothesis, first articulated by paleontologist Paul Martin in the 1960s, proposes that human hunting pressure was the primary driver of Pleistocene megafauna extinctions in North America. This model suggests that the arrival of sophisticated hunters equipped with effective weaponry created unprecedented predation pressure on naive prey populations that had evolved no behavioural defences against human predators. The rapid spread of Clovis technology across the continent would have exposed megafauna populations to intensive hunting pressure within a time span too brief for evolutionary adaptation. Computer simulations of human megafauna interactions support the plausibility of hunting-driven extinctions under certain demographic and behavioural assumptions. Models incorporating realistic parameters for human population growth, hunting efficiency, and megafauna reproductive rates demonstrate that relatively small founding populations of skilled hunters could drive large herbivore species to extinction within a few centuries. These simulations suggest that extinction risk was particularly high for species with slow reproductive rates and large body sizes that made them attractive targets for human hunters. The naivety of megafauna populations toward human predators represents a crucial factor in overkill scenarios, as animals that had never encountered human hunters would have lacked appropriate avoidance behaviours. Ethnographic studies of hunting in regions where large mammals had no previous exposure to human predation document remarkably high success rates for hunters pursuing naive prey. The absence of human populations in North America prior to the late Pleistocene would have left megafauna species completely unprepared for the novel predation pressure represented by skilled hunters armed with sophisticated weaponry. Archaeological evidence for intensive megafauna exploitation by Clovis hunters includes not only the dramatic kill sites that preserve direct evidence of hunting activities, but also the broader patterns of tool design and settlement organisation that reflect specialisation for large game hunting. The robust construction and large size of Clovis projectile points clearly indicate their optimization for hunting massive prey, while the geographic distribution of Clovis sites corresponds closely with areas that supported high megafauna densities during the late Pleistocene. The efficiency of Clovis hunting technology, demonstrated through experimental archaeology and analysis of kill site evidence, supports arguments for significant human impact on megafauna populations. Properly hafted, Clovis points propelled by atlatls possess sufficient penetrating power to inflict lethal wounds on the largest Pleistocene mammals. While the coordinated hunting strategies evidenced at sites like Murray Springs enabled small groups of hunters to kill multiple animals during single hunting episodes. The systematic butchering practices documented at Clovis kill sites indicate thorough utilization of carcasses that maximized returns from successful hunts. Critics of the overkill hypothesis argue that climate change during the Younger Dryas period provides a more compelling explanation for megafauna extinctions through habitat destruction and resource limitation. The rapid cooling and increased aridity that characterized this period caused massive vegetation changes that eliminated or fragmented the habitats required by large herbivore populations. Grassland and parkland environments that had supported mammoth and mastodon populations contracted dramatically, while forest ecosystems underwent major compositional changes that affected browse availability for woodland species. Paleo-environmental reconstructions document the severity of habitat changes that occurred during the early Younger Dryas period across North America. Pollen records from sites throughout the Great Plains reveal the replacement of productive grassland communities by sparse, cold-adapted vegetation that could support much lower herbivore biomass. The mixed parkland environments that had characterized the transition zones between forests and grasslands largely disappeared, eliminating crucial habitat for species that required access to both woody browse and open grazing areas. The timing of vegetation changes corresponds closely with the onset of megafauna extinctions, supporting arguments for climate-driven habitat loss as a primary extinction mechanism. Rapid shifts in plant communities would have created severe nutritional stress for herbivore populations that had adapted to specific vegetation types over thousands of years. Species with narrow dietary requirements or limited mobility would have been particularly vulnerable to habitat changes that occurred faster than evolutionary adaptation could compensate. Drought conditions during the Younger Dryas period may have created additional stress for megafauna populations through reduced water availability and increased competition for remaining resources. Paleoclimatic evidence indicates that much of North America experienced significantly reduced precipitation during this period, causing the desiccation of wetland habitats and the concentration of remaining water sources. The increased crowding around limited water sources would have intensified competition between species while creating optimal conditions for disease transmission and predation. The synergistic effects of climate change and human hunting pressure likely created a deadly combination that made megafauna extinctions virtually inevitable once both factors were operating simultaneously. Climate-induced habitat loss would have reduced carrying capacity for large herbivore populations, while concentrating remaining animals in refugial areas where they became more vulnerable to human hunters. The physiological stress caused by nutritional limitation and environmental change would have reduced reproductive success and increased mortality rates, making populations less resilient to additional mortality from hunting. Mathematical models incorporating both climatic and anthropogenic factors demonstrate that extinction risk increases exponentially when multiple stressors operate simultaneously rather than independently. Populations that might have survived either climate change or hunting pressure alone become vulnerable to extinction when faced with both challenges simultaneously. The timing of human arrival in North America during a period of major climatic instability created conditions that maximized extinction risk for large mammal species. Regional variations in extinction timing and patterns provide additional insights into the relative importance of different causal factors across the continent. Areas that experienced the most severe climatic changes, such as the northern Great Plains and the Great Lakes region, show earlier extinction dates for most megafauna species. Conversely, regions with more stable climatic conditions, such as parts of the southeastern United States, preserve evidence for slightly later survival of some species, though ultimate extinction was universal across all regions. The differential survival of various megafauna species provides clues about the specific factors that determined extinction risk during this period. Mammoths and mastodons, which were clearly targeted by Clovis hunters and required specific habitat conditions, were among the first species to disappear. Ground sloths, which were less frequently hunted but had very slow reproductive rates, survived somewhat longer but ultimately succumbed to the combined pressures of habitat loss and occasional human predation. Smaller megafauna species such as giant beavers and large carnivores experienced extinction patterns that suggest different causal mechanisms than those affecting the largest herbivores. Giant beavers required specific aquatic habitats that may have been particularly vulnerable to climatic changes, while large carnivores faced cascading effects from the collapse of their prey base. The extinction of short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, and dire wolves followed the disappearance of their primary prey species, suggesting that predator extinctions were secondary effects of herbivore population collapses. The survival of bison populations through the extinction event provides important insights into the factors that enabled some large mammals to persist, while others disappeared. Bison possess several characteristics that may have enhanced their survival prospects, including relatively fast reproductive rates, behavioral flexibility that enabled exploitation of diverse habitats, and herd structures that provided protection against predators. The continued presence of viable bison populations also demonstrates that habitat changes during the Younger Dryas were not uniformly catastrophic across all ecosystems. Archaeological evidence for changing Clovis subsistence strategies during the extinction period reveals the cultural impacts of megafauna population collapses on human populations. Late Clovis sites show increased emphasis on smaller game species and more intensive exploitation of plant resources, suggesting that hunting groups were forced to diversify their subsistence base as preferred prey species became increasingly scarce. Tool assemblages from these sites include more implements designed for processing smaller animals and plant materials, indicating technological adaptations to changing resource availability. The apparent abandonment of many traditional Clovis territories during the extinction period suggests that some regions became unsuitable for human occupation as megafauna populations collapsed. Sites in the northern Great Plains and other areas that had supported intensive Clovis occupation show evidence for reduced human activity or complete abandonment after 12,700 years ago. This pattern indicates that the loss of megafauna resources had profound impacts on human settlement patterns and population distributions. Technological changes evident in late Clovis assemblages reflect adaptations to new hunting requirements and resource constraints imposed by megafauna extinctions. Projectile points from terminal Clovis contexts show modifications in size and design that suggest adaptation to smaller prey species, while the increased frequency of tool recycling and curation indicates resource stress that required more intensive management of lithic materials. The development of new tool types specialized for processing smaller animals and plant resources demonstrates the technological flexibility that enabled some Clovis groups to survive the transition period. The social implications of megafauna extinctions for Clovis populations likely included the breakdown of traditional social networks and territorial arrangements that had been based on predictable megafauna resources. The extensive mobility patterns and large territorial ranges that had characterized Clovis settlement systems became unsustainable as the resource base that supported them disappeared. Groups were forced to reorganize their social and economic systems around more localized and diverse resource bases that required different organizational strategies. Population responses to resource stress during the extinction period probably included both demographic decline and geographic reorganization as human groups adapted to new environmental conditions. Archaeological evidence suggests that overall human population densities decreased significantly during the terminal Clovis period, though some regions may have experienced population increases as groups concentrated in areas with more reliable resources. The apparent cultural discontinuity between Clovis and subsequent archaeological traditions suggests that many populations did not survive the transition period intact. The emergence of post-Clovis archaeological cultures represents the successful adaptation of some human populations to post-extinction environments that lacked the megafauna resources that had supported their predecessors. Folsom culture, which succeeded Clovis across much of the Great Plains after 12,800 years ago, developed specialized technologies for hunting the surviving bison populations while abandoning the megafauna hunting strategies that had defined Clovis culture. Other regional traditions that emerged during this period show similar patterns of technological and subsistence reorganization adapted to new environmental conditions. The long-term ecological consequences of Pleistocene megafauna extinctions extended far beyond the immediate loss of large mammal species to include fundamental changes in vegetation structure, nutrient cycling, and ecosystem dynamics across North America. The disappearance of large herbivores that had shaped plant communities through grazing, browsing, and trampling activities allowed vegetation to develop in new directions that created the ecosystems encountered by later human populations. Fire regimes, soil development, and plant succession patterns all changed in response to the absence of megafauna influence. Seed dispersal networks that had depended on large mammals for transport of fruits and seeds were disrupted by extinctions, leading to changes in plant community composition and distribution patterns. Many large-seeded plants that had co-evolved with megafauna dispersers became extinct or experienced severe range contractions following the loss of their animal partners. These cascading effects of megafauna extinctions continued to influence ecosystem development for thousands of years after the initial species losses. The debate over extinction mechanisms continues to generate new research and analytical approaches that refine our understanding of this critical period in North American prehistory. Advances in radiocarbon dating techniques, ancient DNA analysis, and paleo-environmental reconstruction methods are providing increasingly detailed pictures of extinction chronologies and environmental conditions during the terminal Pleistocene. These new data sources are enabling more sophisticated tests of competing hypotheses while revealing the complex interactions between climatic, ecological, and anthropogenic factors that shaped extinction patterns. Ancient DNA studies of megafauna populations are beginning to reveal the demographic histories of extinct species during their final millennia, providing insights into population bottlenecks, genetic diversity, and evolutionary responses to environmental change. These genetic data complement traditional paleontological approaches by revealing population dynamics that are not apparent from fossil evidence alone. The integration of genetic and archaeological evidence is creating more comprehensive models of human megafauna interactions during the extinction period. Isotopic analyses of megafauna remains are providing detailed information about dietary changes and habitat use patterns during the approach to extinction, revealing how species responded to environmental changes and resource limitation. These studies document shifts in feeding behavior and habitat selection that reflect the environmental stresses that contributed to population declines. The comparison of isotopic signatures from different time periods allows researchers to track the progression of environmental changes and their impacts on animal behavior. The development of more sophisticated climate models is improving our understanding of the environmental changes that occurred during the Younger Dryas period and their potential impacts on megafauna populations. These models incorporate detailed paleo-environmental data to reconstruct temperature, precipitation, and vegetation patterns with unprecedented spatial and temporal resolution. The ability to model past environmental conditions more accurately enables better assessment of the relative importance of climatic versus anthropogenic factors in driving extinctions. The collapse of North America's megafauna populations and the environmental upheavals of the Younger Dryas period created unprecedented challenges that fundamentally transformed human societies across the continent. As mammoth herds vanished from the grasslands and mastodon populations disappeared from eastern forests, the sophisticated hunting cultures that had depended on these massive prey animals faced an existential crisis that demanded rapid cultural adaptation or extinction. The archaeological record reveals that while some populations failed to survive this transition, others developed innovative technologies and subsistence strategies that not only ensured survival, but established the foundation for thousands of years of subsequent cultural development across North America. The emergence of Folsom culture across the Great Plains after 12,800 years ago represents the most thoroughly documented example of successful post-Clovis adaptation. Folsom groups developed projectile point technology that surpassed even Clovis innovations in terms of manufacturing sophistication and functional effectiveness. Folsom points feature fluting that extends nearly the full length of the implement, creating extremely thin cross-sections that required extraordinary skill to produce successfully. Archaeological experiments demonstrate that fewer than 1 in 10 attempts at Folsom point manufacture results in a successful finished product, even when conducted by highly skilled modern knappers with extensive experience in prehistoric technologies. The technological demands of Folsom point production necessitated fundamental changes in lithic procurement and manufacturing strategies compared to their Clovis predecessors. Folsom knappers required access to extremely high-quality raw materials with perfect homogeneity and predictable fracture properties. The slightest flaw or inclusion in the stone could cause catastrophic failure during the delicate fluting process, making material selection even more critical than it had been for Clovis toolmakers. This requirement led to increased emphasis on long-distance procurement of premium lithic resources, with some Folsom groups transporting materials across distances exceeding 500 kilometers. The Lindenmeyer site in Colorado exemplifies the sophisticated organizational systems that Folsom groups developed to support their demanding technological requirements. Excavations at this site revealed extensive workshops where skilled artisans produced large quantities of Folsom points using materials obtained from sources scattered across the Rocky Mountain region. The spatial organization of these workshops indicates systematic division of labor, with discrete areas designated for different stages of the manufacturing process. Novice knappers appear to have practiced basic techniques in peripheral areas, while master craftsmen worked with the highest quality materials in central workshop zones. Folsom hunting strategies represented a complete reorganization of subsistence practices adapted to the post-megafauna environment. With mammoth and mastodon populations extinct, Folsom groups focused their efforts on the surviving bison herds that continue to roam the Great Plains in substantial numbers. However, these bison were significantly smaller than their Pleistocene predecessors and possessed different behavioral characteristics that required modified hunting approaches. Folsom hunters developed sophisticated drive techniques that involved herding bison into natural or constructed traps where entire herds could be killed during coordinated communal hunts. The Olson Chubbuck site in Colorado preserves exceptional evidence for Folsom bison hunting strategies through its preservation of nearly 200 bison skeletons in anatomical positions that reveal the dynamics of a successful drive hunt. Archaeological analysis indicates that hunters positioned themselves at strategic locations around a natural arroyo and systematically drove a bison herd into this trap during late spring when the animals were in optimal condition. The systematic butchering patterns evident at the site demonstrate sophisticated understanding of bison anatomy and efficient processing techniques that maximized meat yields while minimizing labor investment. Seasonal mobility patterns among Folsom groups reflected adaptations to the more predictable but geographically restricted movements of post-Pleistocene bison herds. Unlike the continent-spanning territories that had characterized Clovis populations, Folsom groups operated within more circumscribed regional territories that followed the seasonal migrations of their primary prey species. These territories typically encompassed areas of several thousand square kilometers that included both summer and winter bison ranges, along with the lithic sources necessary for tool manufacture. The technological innovations that enabled Folsom's success extended beyond projectile points to include specialized tools for bison processing and hide preparation. End scrapers from Folsom sites show distinctive morphological characteristics that reflect adaptations to processing the thicker, more durable hides of post-Pleistocene bison. These implements feature steeper edge angles and more robust construction than their Clovis counterparts, modifications that provided the durability necessary for intensive hideworking activities. The systematic production of these specialized tools indicates that hide processing had become a crucial component of Folsom economic systems. Contemporaneous with Folsom developments in the plains, other regions of North America witnessed the emergence of distinct post-Clovis traditions that reflected local environmental conditions and available resources. The Dalton culture, which appeared across much of the southeastern United States between 12,500 and 11,500 years ago, developed technological and subsistence strategies adapted to the diverse forest environments that characterized this region following Younger Dryas climatic changes. Dalton groups exploited a broad range of plant and animal resources while maintaining some technological connections to their Clovis predecessors. Dalton projectile points exhibit morphological characteristics that clearly derive from Clovis prototypes, while displaying distinctive modifications that reflect changing functional requirements. These points typically feature serrated edges and beveled bases that enhance cutting efficiency while providing secure hafting capabilities. The serrated edges, created through systematic pressure flaking that produce sharp projections along the blade margins, increase the effective cutting surface area and may have improved penetration characteristics when hunting smaller game species that had become primary targets following megafauna extinctions. The technological versatility evident in Dalton tool assemblages reflects the diverse subsistence activities that characterized post-Clovis adaptations in southeastern environments. Dalton sites contain extensive arrays of plant processing equipment, including grinding stones, mortars, and specialized cutting implements designed for working with various botanical materials. These tools show distinctive wear patterns indicating intensive use in processing nuts, seeds, roots, and other plant foods that provided essential carbohydrates and supplemented hunting returns. The systematic investment in plant processing technology demonstrates the crucial role that botanical resources played in post-Clovis subsistence strategies. Dalton settlement patterns reveal organizational systems that balance mobility requirements with the need to exploit seasonally available resources across diverse southeastern landscapes. Base camps were typically established in river valleys or other locations that provided access to multiple resource zones while offering reliable water sources and materials for tool manufacture. These central locations served as staging areas for specialized task groups that exploited specific resources such as nut groves, quarry sites, or seasonal hunting areas before returning to share their proceeds with the larger community. The Brand site in Arkansas exemplifies the complex settlement systems that Dalton groups developed to exploit southeastern environments effectively. This site preserves evidence for repeated occupations over several centuries, with each occupation representing different seasonal activities and resource exploitation strategies. Spring occupations focused on fish runs and early plant foods. Summer activities emphasized diverse foraging and small game hunting, while fall occupations involved intensive nut processing and preparation for winter resource scarcity. The systematic reoccupation of optimal locations demonstrates sophisticated territorial management that maximized resource yields while minimizing travel costs. Technological diversification among Dalton populations included the development of specialized tools for aquatic resource exploitation that had not been prominent components of Clovis assemblages. Fish hooks manufactured from bone and antler materials appear in Dalton contexts, along with specialized processing tools for working with aquatic species. These innovations reflect the increased importance of riverine and lacustrine resources in post-megafauna subsistence systems as groups sought to replace the protein that had previously been provided by large terrestrial mammals. The geographic distribution of post-Clovis cultures reveals complex patterns of cultural transmission and local adaptation that created a mosaic of regional traditions across North America. While some regions show clear technological continuities with Clovis predecessors, others display more dramatic cultural discontinuities that suggest population replacement or fundamental reorganization of social systems. The Eastern Great Lakes region witnessed the emergence of several distinct traditions, including Gainey, Barnes, and Crowfield cultures that shared certain technological characteristics while displaying significant regional variations. Gainey culture, distributed across portions of Michigan, Ohio, and adjacent areas between 12,800 and 12,400 years ago, represents one of the clearest examples of technological continuity with Clovis traditions. Gainey points exhibit fluting and overall morphological characteristics that closely resemble Clovis prototypes, while displaying subtle modifications that may reflect local stylistic preferences or functional adaptations. The geographic distribution of Gainey sites suggests that these populations maintained some of the extensive territorial ranges that had characterized their Clovis predecessors, though at reduced scales that reflected changing resource availability. Barnes culture, which succeeded Gainey in some areas of the Great Lakes region, developed projectile point technologies that departed more dramatically from Clovis antecedents, while maintaining certain technological connections. Barnes points feature distinctive notched bases and modified fluting techniques that created different hafting configurations compared to earlier traditions. These technological innovations may reflect adaptations to different prey species or hunting strategies that became necessary as post-Younger Dryas environments continued to evolve. The Crowfield culture of southern Ontario represents an even more dramatic departure from Clovis technological traditions through its development of distinctive fluted points with unique morphological characteristics. Crowfield points feature pronounced basal ears and modified fluting patterns that created hafting systems unlike any seen in earlier traditions. The limited geographic distribution of Crowfield culture suggests that it may represent a local adaptation to specific environmental conditions in the Great Lakes region, rather than a widespread technological tradition. Western North America witnessed the emergence of several distinct post-Clovis traditions that reflected the diverse environmental conditions and resource bases available across this vast and topographically complex region. The Haskett culture of the northern Intermountain West developed projectile point technologies that maintained some Clovis characteristics, while displaying modifications adapted to local hunting requirements. Haskett points typically feature reduced fluting and distinctive base configurations that may have provided advantages when hunting the mountain sheep and other species that inhabited high-elevation environments. Stemmed point traditions that emerged across much of the western United States after 12,500 years ago represent more dramatic departures from Clovis technological patterns. These traditions, including western-stemmed, windust and related complexes, developed projectile point technologies that abandoned fluting entirely in favour of stemmed hafting systems that may have provided superior performance characteristics under certain conditions. The widespread adoption of stem point technologies across diverse Western environments suggests that these innovations offered significant functional advantages over fluted point systems. The technological diversity evident in Western stem point traditions reflects adaptations to the varied environmental conditions and resource bases that characterize different subregions of Western North America. Desert environments favored projectile point designs optimized for hunting smaller game species and processing diverse plant resources, while mountain regions required tools adapted to high-elevation hunting and specialized resource extraction activities. Coastal areas witnessed the development of technologies for exploiting marine and estuarine resources that supplemented terrestrial hunting and gathering activities. Population dispersal patterns during the post-Clovis period created opportunities for cultural innovation and regional specialization that had been constrained by the continent-spanning uniformity of Clovis culture. As human populations became more geographically isolated due to reduced mobility and smaller territorial ranges, different groups began developing distinct solutions to similar environmental challenges. This process of cultural diversification established the foundation for the remarkable cultural diversity that would characterize North American indigenous societies for thousands of years. The mechanisms of cultural transmission during the post-Clovis period appear to have operated at more localized scales than the extensive networks that had maintained Clovis technological standardization across the continent. Archaeological evidence suggests that information exchange continued between neighboring groups through seasonal aggregations and intermarriage networks, but the rapid pace of technological change evident in post-Clovis assemblages indicates that innovation was occurring faster than it could be transmitted across large distances. This acceleration of cultural evolution reflects both the environmental pressures that demanded rapid adaptation and the reduced constraints on innovation that resulted from decreased cultural contact. Settlement pattern changes during the post-Clovis period reflect fundamental reorganizations of social and economic systems that adapted human societies to post-megafauna environments. The highly mobile, extensive territorial systems that had characterized Clovis populations gave way to more sedentary adaptations that emphasized intensive exploitation of localized resource bases. This transition involved not only changes in mobility patterns, but also modifications in social organization, technological systems, and subsistence strategies that created entirely new forms of human adaptation. The development of more intensive plant exploitation strategies represents one of the most significant changes in post-Clovis subsistence systems. Archaeological evidence indicates that many post-Clovis groups invested substantial labour in plant processing activities that had been secondary components of Clovis economic systems. The systematic collection, processing and storage of nuts, seeds, roots, and other plant foods required sophisticated scheduling of seasonal activities and development of specialized technologies for extracting maximum nutritional value from botanical resources. Nut processing activities became particularly important components of post-Clovis subsistence systems across much of eastern North America, where oak, hickory, walnut, and other mass-producing species provided abundant fall harvests. Archaeological sites from this period contain extensive evidence for nut processing, including grinding stones, storage pits, and specialized cracking tools that enabled efficient extraction of nut meats. The labor investment required for systematic nut processing necessitated more sedentary settlement patterns that allowed groups to remain in proximity to productive groves during harvest seasons. Seed processing technologies also underwent significant development during the post-Clovis period as groups sought to exploit the diverse grass and forb species that colonized disturbed environments following Younger Dryas climatic changes. Small-seeded plants required intensive processing to extract meaningful nutritional returns, but they offered the advantage of being available across broad geographic areas and multiple seasons. The development of efficient seed processing techniques enabled post-Clovis groups to exploit these abundant but labor-intensive resources effectively. Root and tuber exploitation became increasingly important in many regions as groups developed sophisticated techniques for locating, harvesting, and processing underground plant storage organs. These resources offered reliable carbohydrate sources that could be obtained throughout much of the year, though they required detailed botanical knowledge and specialized digging tools for efficient exploitation. The systematic utilization of root resources contributed to the development of more sedentary settlement patterns as groups established base camps near productive areas. Hunting strategies underwent fundamental reorganizations as post-Clovis groups adapted to prey species that differed dramatically from the megafauna that had supported their predecessors. Small game hunting required different technological approaches and organizational systems than the coordinated megafauna hunts that had characterized Clovis culture. Individual hunters or small groups could effectively pursue deer, rabbits, birds, and other smaller species without the extensive coordination that mammoth hunting had demanded. The development of specialized small game hunting technologies included modifications in projectile point design, trap construction, and processing techniques that maximized returns from smaller prey species. Projectile points became smaller and lighter to provide optimal performance against smaller targets, while trap technologies were developed to capture species that were difficult to hunt with projectiles alone. These technological innovations required detailed knowledge of animal behavior and habitat preferences that enabled hunters to predict and exploit prey movements effectively. Bird hunting became an increasingly important component of post-Clovis subsistence strategies as groups developed techniques for exploiting the diverse avian resources available across North American environments. Waterfowl hunting during migration periods could provide substantial protein resources, while year-round residents offered more predictable, though smaller-scale hunting opportunities. The development of specialized bird hunting technologies, including nets, traps, and modified projectile systems, enabled systematic exploitation of avian resources. Aquatic resource exploitation expanded significantly during the post-Clovis period, as groups recognized the potential of riverine, lacustrine, and coastal environments to provide reliable protein sources. Fish runs during spawning seasons offered opportunities for intensive harvesting that could provide substantial quantities of protein within brief time periods. The development of specialized fishing technologies, including hooks, nets, weirs, and processing tools, enabled systematic exploitation of aquatic resources that supplemented terrestrial hunting returns. Social organization changes during the post-Clovis period reflected the different coordination requirements and resource management challenges that characterized post-megafauna environments. The small, highly mobile bands that had been optimal for megafauna hunting gave way to larger, more sedentary groups that could more effectively exploit diverse local resources through coordinated labor activities. These larger social units required different leadership structures and decision-making processes than their Clovis predecessors. The increased importance of plant processing activities created opportunities for specialized knowledge and skills that may have enhanced the status of individuals with expertise in botanical resources. Unlike megafauna hunting, which had emphasized physical strength and coordination, plant exploitation required detailed environmental knowledge and processing skills that could be developed by individuals regardless of physical capabilities. This diversification of valued skills may have created more egalitarian social structures than those that had characterized hunting-focused Clovis societies. Technological specialization became increasingly important as post-Clovis groups developed diverse tool assemblages adapted to multiple resource exploitation strategies. The production of specialized plant processing equipment, fishing gear, small game hunting tools, and other implements required knowledge and skills that exceeded the capabilities of individual craftsmen. This technological complexity encouraged the development of part-time specialists who could produce high-quality implements in exchange for access to resources obtained by other group members. Storage technologies underwent significant development during the post-Clovis period, as groups sought to manage the seasonal availability patterns that characterized their diverse resource bases. The transition from megafauna hunting to more diversified subsistence strategies created an entirely new archaeological landscape that would challenge researchers for generations to come. When the first Clovis points were discovered near Clovis, New Mexico in 1929, archaeologists had no conception of the revolutionary implications these distinctive artifacts would have for understanding the peopling of the Americas. The initial discoveries at Blackwater Draw fundamentally transformed archaeological thinking about the antiquity of human occupation in North America. Edgar Howard's excavations in the 1930s revealed fluted projectile points in direct association with extinct mammoth remains, providing the first unambiguous evidence that humans had coexisted with Pleistocene megafauna on the continent. The stratigraphic integrity of these finds and their association with reliable radiocarbon dates established a chronological framework that pushed back the accepted timeline for human presence in the Americas by thousands of years. The significance of these early discoveries extended beyond simple chronology to encompass fundamental questions about human technological capabilities and adaptive strategies during the late Pleistocene. The sophisticated craftsmanship evident in Clovis projectile points challenged prevailing assumptions about the technological limitations of early hunter-gatherer societies. The precision required for successful fluting and the standardization of tool forms across vast geographic distances suggested levels of cultural organization and technological transmission that exceeded anything previously documented for such early time periods. Subsequent discoveries at sites like Lerna, Murray Springs and Naco confirmed and expanded upon the initial Blackwater Draw findings while revealing the continental scope of Clovis culture. Each new site added crucial details about Clovis technology, subsistence strategies and settlement patterns, while raising new questions about the mechanisms that enabled such rapid and extensive cultural expansion. The accumulation of radiocarbon dates from multiple sites established a robust chronological framework placing Clovis culture between approximately 13,500 and 12,800 years ago. The development of improved excavation techniques and analytical methods during the latter half of the 20th century revolutionized Clovis research by enabling more detailed reconstruction of site formation processes and cultural activities. Controlled excavations at sites like Galt, Anzik and East Wenatchee employed systematic recovery methods that preserved spatial relationships between artifacts and features while documenting the full range of activities that occurred at Clovis localities. These methodological advances reveal the complexity of Clovis cultural systems that extended far beyond the projectile point technology that had initially defined the tradition. Advances in lithic analysis during the 1980s and 1990s provided unprecedented insights into Clovis technological organization and raw material procurement strategies. Chemical sourcing studies using X-ray fluorescence and neutron activation analysis enabled researchers to trace stone tools back to their geological sources, revealing the enormous territorial ranges and sophisticated logistical systems that characterized Clovis populations. These studies documented material transport distances exceeding 500 kilometers and demonstrated the existence of continent-spanning networks for information and resource exchange. The application of useware analysis to Clovis tool assemblages revealed the full functional repertoire of these sophisticated implements while documenting the diverse subsistence activities that supported Clovis populations. Microscopic examination of tool edges using high-powered microscopy revealed distinctive wear patterns associated with hide processing, woodworking, bone carving, and plant processing activities. These analyses demonstrated that Clovis technology encompassed far more than hunting equipment and included the full range of implements necessary for mobile hunter-gatherer lifestyles. Experimental archaeology emerged as a crucial research tool for understanding Clovis technological processes and functional capabilities. Skilled modern knappers attempted to replicate Clovis manufacturing techniques while documenting the challenges and skill requirements involved in producing fluted projectile points. These experiments revealed the extraordinary expertise required for successful Clovis point production and provided insights into the learning processes and social mechanisms necessary for transmitting such demanding technological knowledge across generations. The discovery of Clovis caches during the 1960s and 1970s added new dimensions to understanding Clovis cultural organization and territorial management strategies. The East Wenatchee cache in Washington contained over 40 beautifully crafted implements manufactured from exotic raw materials, while the fen cache from Wyoming included some of the largest and most elaborate bifaces known from any prehistoric context. These remarkable assemblages demonstrated the sophisticated planning and resource management capabilities that enabled Clovis groups to maintain technological efficiency across vast territories. Taphonomic studies of Clovis kill sites provided crucial insights into hunting strategies and carcass processing techniques, while documenting the ecological relationships between humans and Pleistocene megafauna. Detailed analysis of bone modifications at sites like Blackwater Draw and Murray Springs revealed systematic butchering patterns that maximised meat yields, while providing evidence for the coordinated group activities necessary for processing massive carcasses. These studies established clear linkages between human activities and megafauna mortality during the terminal Pleistocene. The emergence of pre-Clovis archaeology during the 1980s and 1990s challenged the long-held assumption that Clovis represented the earliest human occupation of the Americas. Sites like Monteverde in Chile, Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, and Cactus Hill in Virginia produced evidence suggesting human presence before 13,500 years ago, though these claims remained controversial due to questions about stratigraphic integrity and dating reliability. The pre-Clovis debate intensified as new sites were discovered and existing sites were re-evaluated using improved analytical techniques. The acceptance of Monteverde as a legitimate pre-Clovis site in 1997 represented a watershed moment in American archaeology that fundamentally altered discussions about the timing and mechanisms of initial human colonization. Tom Dillahay's meticulous excavations and comprehensive documentation of organic artifacts, architectural features, and stratigraphic relationships provided compelling evidence for human occupation at 14,600 years ago. This acceptance forced archaeologists to reconsider models of human migration and cultural development that had been based on Clovis first assumptions. Subsequent pre-Clovis discoveries at sites like Buttermilk Creek in Texas, Paisley Caves in Oregon, and Page Ladson in Florida have continued to push back the timeline for initial human presence while revealing the technological diversity that characterized pre-Clovis populations. The Buttermilk Creek complex underlying the famous Galt Clovis site contains thousands of stone tools in clear stratigraphic context, with radiocarbon dates extending to 15,500 years ago. These assemblages demonstrate sophisticated lithic technologies that predate Clovis by over 2,000 years while showing clear technological relationships to later traditions. Ancient DNA analysis has emerged as perhaps the most revolutionary development in Clovis research since the original discoveries at Blackwater Draw. The successful extraction and analysis of DNA from the Ansic burial in Montana provided the first direct genetic evidence about Clovis populations, while establishing clear relationships to modern Native American groups. The Ansic genome revealed that Clovis populations were directly ancestral to many contemporary Native American populations, confirming biological continuity despite cultural changes that occurred during the post-Clovis period. Comparative genomics studies have expanded upon the Ansic findings by analysing ancient DNA from pre-Clovis, Clovis, and post-Clovis contexts across the Americas. These studies reveal complex patterns of population movement, genetic admixture, and demographic change that occurred during the initial colonization period. The genetic evidence indicates that all Native American populations derive from a single founding population that entered the Americas through Beringia, though this population may have been subdivided into distinct lineages before spreading throughout the continents. Population genetics research has provided insights into the demographic processes that characterized early American populations, while revealing the genetic bottlenecks and founder effects that shaped Native American genetic diversity. Studies of mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome variation indicate that the effective population size of founding groups was quite small, possibly numbering in the hundreds of individuals. This small founding population underwent rapid expansion and geographic dispersal that created the patterns of genetic variation observed in contemporary Native American populations. Improved radiocarbon dating techniques have revolutionized chronological studies of Clovis and related cultures by providing more precise and reliable age estimates for archaeological deposits. The development of accelerator mass spectrometry dating enabled analysis of much smaller samples while reducing contamination risks that had plagued earlier dating efforts. These improvements have refined the chronological framework for Clovis culture, while enabling a more precise correlation between archaeological and paleo-environmental records. Bayesian statistical modelling of radiocarbon dates has further enhanced chronological precision by incorporating multiple dates from individual sites and regions into comprehensive temporal frameworks. These analyses have revealed the rapid spread of Clovis technology across North America, while documenting regional variations in timing and cultural development. The statistical modelling approaches have also enabled more sophisticated testing of competing hypotheses about the relationships between Clovis and pre-Clovis populations. Paleo-environmental reconstruction techniques have provided increasingly detailed pictures of the climatic and ecological conditions that characterise the Clovis period. High-resolution pollen records, ice core data, and marine sediment cores have documented the environmental changes that occurred during the late Pleistocene, while revealing the complex relationships between climate, vegetation, and animal populations. These reconstructions have enhanced understanding of the environmental challenges that Clovis populations faced and the adaptive strategies they employed. The integration of archaeological and paleo and environmental data has enabled more sophisticated modelling of human-environment interactions during the Clovis period. Computer simulations incorporating realistic parameters for human population growth, environmental carrying capacity, and resource availability have provided insights into the demographic and ecological processes that shaped early American populations. These models have been particularly valuable for testing hypotheses about the role of human hunting in Pleistocene megafauna extinctions. Geographic information systems technology has revolutionized spatial analysis of Clovis sites by enabling sophisticated examination of settlement patterns and environmental relationships. GIS applications have revealed correlations between site locations and environmental variables such as water sources, lithic resources, and topographic features that influence Clovis settlement decisions. These analyses have provided insights into the territorial organization and mobility strategies that characterized Clovis populations. Lithic technological studies have continued to evolve through the application of new analytical techniques and theoretical frameworks that provide deeper insights into Clovis cultural organization. Chain operatoire analysis has revealed the complete technological sequences involved in Clovis tool production, while documenting the skill levels and time investments required for different manufacturing stages. These studies have enhanced understanding of the social mechanisms involved in technological transmission and the economic factors that influence tool production decisions. Microear analysis using scanning electron microscopy has provided unprecedented detail about tool use patterns and functional specialization within Clovis assemblages. These studies have revealed the diverse range of activities performed with Clovis implements, while documenting the maintenance and curation strategies that enabled efficient tool use across extended periods. The functional analysis has also provided insights into the division of labour and activity organisation that characterised Clovis social systems. Residue analysis techniques have begun to provide direct evidence for the organic materials that Clovis tools were used to process, offering new insights into subsistence practices and technological applications. Protein residue analysis of stone tools has identified blood and other organic materials from specific animal species, providing direct evidence for hunting activities and prey selection patterns. Plant residue analysis has revealed the use of stone tools for processing various botanical materials, documenting the importance of plant resources in Clovis subsistence strategies. The debate over Clovis population estimates continues to generate new research approaches and analytical techniques. Traditional estimates based on site density and carrying capacity calculations have suggested total Clovis populations ranging from a few thousand to several 100,000 individuals. More recent approaches incorporating genetic diversity data and demographic modelling have generally supported estimates toward the lower end of this range, though significant uncertainty remains about the actual size of Clovis populations. Settlement pattern analysis has provided insights into Clovis social organisation and territorial management strategies, while revealing the sophisticated logistical systems that enabled their mobile lifestyle. Studies of site distributions and artifact assemblages have documented the specialised functions of different site types, including base camps, kill sites, quarry localities, and cache locations. These analyses have revealed the complex organisational systems that coordinated activities across vast territories while maintaining cultural coherence. The relationship between Clovis and contemporary archaeological cultures remains an active area of research and debate. The Gaini culture of the Great Lakes region shows clear technological relationships to Clovis, while displaying distinctive regional characteristics that may reflect local adaptations or cultural preferences. The temporal and geographic overlap between these traditions suggests complex patterns of cultural interaction and technological transmission that challenge simple models of cultural replacement. Recent discoveries of Clovis Age sites in South America have expanded the geographic scope of research while raising new questions about the speed and mechanisms of initial human dispersal throughout the Americas. Sites like Quebrada Jaguay and Quebrada Tacuay in Peru contain evidence for coastal adaptations that may represent alternative colonization strategies to the terrestrial hunting focus traditionally associated with Clovis culture. These discoveries have highlighted the diversity of adaptive strategies that characterized early American populations. The application of landscape archaeology approaches has provided new perspectives on Clovis land use patterns and territorial organization. These studies examine the relationships between archaeological sites and landscape features at multiple spatial scales, while considering the environmental and logistical factors that influence settlement decisions. Landscape analysis has revealed the sophisticated knowledge systems that enabled Clovis groups to navigate and exploit resources across vast and diverse territories. Isotopic analysis of human remains from Clovis contexts has begun to provide direct evidence about diet, mobility, and life history patterns among these early populations. Stable carbon and nitrogen isotope analysis of the Anzic burial revealed dietary patterns consistent with heavy reliance on terrestrial mammals, while documenting the high trophic level that characterized Clovis subsistence strategies. Strontium isotope analysis has provided insights into mobility patterns and geographic origins of individuals buried at specific sites. The study of Clovis artistic expression and symbolic behaviour has revealed dimensions of cultural complexity that extend beyond purely functional considerations. Engraved bone artifacts from sites like Galt demonstrate sophisticated artistic capabilities while suggesting the existence of symbolic communication systems. Red ochre associated with the Anzic burial provides evidence for ritualized treatment of the dead and possible spiritual beliefs about colour symbolism and afterlife concepts. Computational modelling approaches have become increasingly sophisticated tools for testing hypotheses about Clovis cultural processes and demographic patterns. Agent-based models have simulated the spread of Clovis technology across North America while exploring the social mechanisms that could account for the observed patterns of cultural transmission. These models have provided insights into the population sizes, interaction networks, and technological adoption rates that could produce the archaeological patterns associated with Clovis culture. The integration of multiple lines of evidence from archaeology, genetics, linguistics, and environmental sciences has created increasingly comprehensive models of early American cultural development. Interdisciplinary research programs have revealed the complex interactions between environmental change, technological innovation, and social organization that shape the trajectory of human cultural evolution in the Americas. These integrated approaches have enhanced understanding of the processes that led to the remarkable cultural diversity that characterized pre-Columbian American societies. Current debates about Clovis cultural complexity continue to generate new research questions and analytical approaches. Some researchers argue that the standardization and geographic distribution of Clovis technology indicate levels of social organization and cultural transmission that approach those of later complex societies. Others maintain that Clovis represents a relatively simple hunting adaptation that achieved wide distribution through rapid population expansion and environmental opportunism. The question of Clovis population continuity versus replacement remains contentious, despite advances in genetic analysis and archaeological dating. While the Anzic genome clearly demonstrates genetic continuity between Clovis and later Native American populations, the archaeological record shows significant cultural discontinuities that suggest major social and technological reorganization during the post-Clovis period. Understanding the mechanisms that produce these patterns of biological continuity and cultural change remains a major challenge for American archaeology. The role of Clovis populations in Pleistocene megafauna extinctions continues to generate intense debate as new evidence emerges from both archaeological and paleontological contexts. Recent discoveries of additional kill sites and improved dating of extinction events have refined understanding of the temporal relationships between human activities and species disappearances. However, the relative importance of human hunting versus climate change in driving extinctions remains unresolved despite decades of research. Emerging technologies promise to continue revolutionizing Clovis research in the coming decades. Ancient protein analysis may provide new insights into diet and subsistence practices, while revealing functional aspects of organic tools that have not survived in the archaeological record. Improved ancient DNA techniques may enable analysis of degraded genetic material from a wider range of contexts, while providing more detailed pictures of population relationships and demographic processes. The application of machine learning and artificial intelligence to archaeological data analysis is beginning to reveal patterns and relationships that were not apparent through traditional analytical approaches. These techniques may enable more sophisticated analysis of lithic technological variation, while identifying subtle patterns in artifact distributions that reflect cultural processes. The integration of big data approaches with traditional archaeological methods promises to enhance understanding of the complex cultural and environmental processes that shaped early American societies. The legacy of Clovis culture extends far beyond its chronological position as one of the earliest well-documented archaeological traditions in the Americas. The technological innovations, social organizational strategies, and adaptive capabilities that characterize Clovis populations established precedents that influence subsequent cultural development throughout North American prehistory. The sophisticated lithic technologies, extensive territorial management systems, and complex subsistence strategies that enabled Clovis' success provided foundations upon which later cultures built their own adaptive solutions. The rapid geographic expansion and cultural standardization achieved by Clovis populations demonstrated the potential for human societies to successfully colonize and exploit diverse environments within remarkably brief time periods. This achievement established humans as a continental-scale ecological force, capable of influencing environmental systems and species distributions across vast geographic areas. The Clovis expansion represents one of the most successful examples of human cultural adaptation and geographic colonization in the archaeological record. The technological legacy of Clovis culture influenced lithic traditions throughout North American prehistory, with fluting techniques and bifacial reduction strategies appearing in various forms across different temporal and geographic contexts. The sophisticated understanding of stone tool production that characterized Clovis populations provided technological foundations that were modified and elaborated by subsequent cultures while maintaining core principles of efficient raw material utilization and functional tool design. Modern understanding of Clovis culture continues to evolve as new discoveries and analytical techniques provide fresh insights into the complexity and significance of these early American populations. The integration of archaeological, genetic, environmental, and technological evidence has created increasingly sophisticated models of Clovis cultural systems, while revealing the remarkable achievements of these pioneering societies. As research continues, Clovis culture remains a crucial key to understanding the initial human colonization of the Americas and the foundations of Native American cultural development that would flourish for thousands of years across both continents. The story of the Clovis people represents far more than an archaeological curiosity or academic debate about early American chronology. These remarkable populations achieved one of humanity's greatest colonization successes, spreading sophisticated technologies and cultural adaptations across an entire continent within just a few centuries. Their legacy lives on not only in the archaeological record they left behind, but in the genetic heritage of Native American populations and the cultural foundations they established for thousands of years of subsequent human achievement in the Americas. Understanding Clovis culture provides essential insights into human adaptive capabilities, technological innovation, and the complex relationships between environmental change and cultural development that continue to shape human societies today.